Mama. That was Luna's first word. Not to the woman who died bringing her into the world. Not to the powerful Alpha King who was her father. But to the Omega who found her dying in the snow. Rose Forbes had been invisible her entire life. The weakest wolf in Blood Moon Pack. A creature so beneath notice that even the servants looked down on her. She'd learned to accept her fate to scrub floors and empty garbage, and believe the lie that Omegas deserved nothing better. Then a baby appeared in her path, abandoned, freezing, dying. And Rose did what no one had ever done for her. She refused to walk away. The moment their hands touched, fate rewrote itself. A mark burned into Rose's wrist, ancient, powerful, undeniable. The Alpha King's mate bond, appearing on the most unlikely wolf imaginable. But this wasn't just about Rose and a powerful mate. This was about a baby who saw what others couldn't, who recognized the Silvermoon blood hidden beneath an Omega's submissive exterior, who called out to the one wolf strong enough to protect her from the darkness closing in. Rose thought she was saving Luna. She had no idea Luna was saving her right back. Nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 1. From invisible to impossible. The slop bucket was heavier than usual tonight. Rose Forbes gritted her teeth as she hauled the metal pail across the pack kitchen's stone floor, her thin arms trembling with effort. Potato peels, rotten vegetables, and the congealed fat from tonight's Alpha family feast sloshed against the sides. The stench made her eyes water. Watch it, Omega. She barely had time to step aside before Beta Gabriel Sosa shouldered past her, his expensive leather boots missing the slop bucket by inches. He didn't look at her. Betas never did. To them, Omegas were furniture. Obstacles. Things that existed in the periphery of pack life, useful only when needed, invisible the rest of the time. Rose pressed herself against the cold stone wall and waited for him to pass. Her wolf, small, gray, and pathetically weak, whimpered inside her chest. The animal knew its place, had learned it through years of casual cruelty and systematic neglect. "You're still here?" A sharp voice cut through the kitchen's warm air. Rose's stomach dropped. Lee Key stood in the doorway to the main dining hall, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her designer clothes spotless despite having just finished overseeing the Alpha family's meal. The head Omega. The one wolf who should have protected the lower-ranked pack members but instead ruled over them like a tyrant with something to prove. Rose began. "I don't care." Lee strode forward, her heels clicking against the stone. "The Alpha family's dining room needs to be scrubbed. The grease from tonight's roast splattered everywhere, and I'm not about to let Luna Maxine see filth in her home." Rose's shoulders sagged. She'd already been working for 14 hours straight. Her back ached. Her hands were raw from harsh cleaning chemicals, and the slop bucket still needed to be emptied before the contents froze in the night air. "I'll do it as soon as I come." Lee's hand shot out and knocked the bucket from Rose's grip. The metal pail hit the floor with a deafening clang. Rotten vegetables and congealed fat exploded across the stone, splattering Rose's worn shoes and the hem of her already stained dress. "Oops." Lee's smile was razor sharp. "Looks like you've got another mess to clean up first. Better hurry, Omega." Luna Maxine doesn't tolerate laziness. She turned on her heel and walked away, her laughter echoing off the kitchen walls. Rose stood in the spreading pool of filth, her hands clenched at her sides. Her wolf snarled inside her chest, a pathetic, powerless sound. The animal wanted to fight back, wanted to show teeth and claws and make Lay bleed for every humiliation, every casual cruelty, every moment of degradation. But Omegas didn't fight back. Omegas who challenged their superiors disappeared. Or worse, they stayed and became examples of what happened when the lowest-ranked wolves forgot their place. Rose grabbed the mop from its place against the wall and got to work. 2 hours later, the kitchen and dining room gleamed. Rose's arms felt like lead. Her knees buckled when she finally stood upright after scrubbing the last corner of grease from under the Alpha family's massive dining table. The pack house was quiet now. The Alpha family had retired to their private quarters on the 3rd floor, the floor with heated floors and soft beds and windows that looked out over the forest. The Betas had gone to their comfortable rooms on the 2nd floor. Even the regular pack members had retreated to the dormitories where they slept in warm beds with thick blankets. Rose pulled her threadbare coat from its hook near the back door. The fabric was more holes than cloth now, but it was all she had. Omegas didn't get stipends for new clothes. They got hand-me-downs from wolves who'd worn garments until they literally fell apart. The night air hit her like a physical blow when she stepped outside. December in the Blood Moon Pack's territory was brutal. The Pack's land stretched across the northern mountains where winter came early and stayed late. Snow already blanketed the ground in thick drifts, and the wind carried the promise of a storm rolling in from the peaks. Rose wrapped her coat tighter and started the long walk to the Omega Quarters. The quarters was a generous term for what was actually a converted storage shed at the very edge of Packlands. No heat, no insulation. Just 4 walls, a roof that leaked when it rained, and a single wood-burning stove that Rose had to feed with wood she gathered herself. But it was away from the main pack house, away from Lee's cruelty and the casual contempt of wolves who saw Omegas as less than dirt. Out here, Rose could almost pretend she was alone, free, not trapped in a hierarchy that had marked her as worthless from the moment she presented as an Omega at age 13. She was halfway across the snow-covered grounds when she heard it. A cry, faint, weak, almost lost in the howl of wind through the trees. Rose stopped walking. Her wolf's ears perked up inside her mind, straining to hear past the storm. For a moment, there was nothing but the whistle of wind and the creak of ice-laden branches. Then it came again. A baby's cry. Rose's breath caught in her throat. The sound was coming from the forest, from the dark stretch of woods that bordered the Pack's territory to the north. No one went into those woods at night. The northern forest was wild, untamed, full of rogues and predators, and things worse than either. The cry came a third time, weaker now, fading. Rose's feet moved before her brain caught up. She plunged into the tree line, her worn boots sinking into snow that came up to her knees. The wind bit through her coat like teeth. Ice crystals stung her cheeks. Her wolf whined in protest. This was dangerous, stupid, the kind of thing that got Omegas killed. But Rose couldn't stop. The crying was so weak now, so faint. A baby was out here, alone in the snow, and if Rose didn't find it soon, there, a bundle of cloth half buried in a snowdrift beneath a massive pine tree. Rose dropped to her knees and brushed away the snow with trembling hands. The cloth was fine, expensive silk that had no business being out in these woods, and wrapped inside was a baby, a tiny, perfect baby girl with dark hair and skin that was already turning blue from the cold. No, no, no. Rose scooped the infant into her arms, tucking the child against her chest and wrapping her coat around them both. The baby wasn't crying anymore, wasn't moving. Her little chest barely rose and fell with shallow, desperate breaths. She was dying. Rose's wolf howled inside her mind. The animal's maternal instincts surged forward. Protect the pup, save the pup, die before letting the pup die. Stay with me. Rose pressed her cheek against the baby's icy forehead. Please stay with me. You're going to be okay. I promise you're going to be okay. The baby's eyes fluttered open. They were gold. Bright, burning gold, the mark of alpha blood. This wasn't just any baby. This was an alpha's child, and someone had left her here to die. Rose's mind raced. She needed to get the baby warm, needed to get her to the pack doctor, needed to find out who this child belonged to and why she'd been abandoned in the snow like garbage. But first, she needed to warm the baby up enough to survive the trip back. Rose shifted the infant in her arms, pulling the silk wrapping tighter and rubbing the child's tiny hands between her own. The baby's fingers were like ice. Her lips were gray. She wasn't going to make it if Rose didn't do something now. Come on. Rose brought the baby's hand up to her mouth, breathing warm air over the frozen fingers. Come on, little one. Fight. Please fight. The baby's tiny hand flexed. Her fingers wrapped around Rose's thumb, and the world exploded. Pain. White-hot, searing, unbearable pain that started at Rose's wrist and shot up her arm like lightning. She screamed. The baby fell from her arms into the snow as Rose collapsed, clutching her wrist. The pain was unlike anything she'd ever felt, worse than breaking bones, worse than silver burns, worse than anything her wolf could have prepared her for. Something was carving itself into her skin. No, not carving, burning, branding. Rose forced her eyes open through tears of agony and looked down at her wrist. A mark was appearing on her skin. Black lines that glowed with golden light, forming an intricate pattern of circles and ancient symbols that Rose didn't recognize, but her wolf understood instantly. Her wolf threw its head back and howled. Because that mark, that impossible, legendary mark that hadn't been seen in 100 years, meant only one thing. The Alpha King's mate mark. The brand that appeared on the wrist of the one wolf in all the world chosen by fate itself to stand beside the most powerful alpha alive. The mark that signified a bond so deep, so unbreakable, that not even death could sever it. The mark that had just burned itself into the wrist of the Blood Moon Pack's weakest, most worthless Omega. Rose stared at the glowing symbols on her skin, her mind refusing to process what she was seeing. This wasn't possible. Fate didn't choose Omegas, didn't reach down and touch wolves like her wolves who were barely worth the air they breathed. The mark pulsed once, twice, then faded from gold to black. The pain vanished as suddenly as it had come. Rose sat in the snow, trembling, her wrist still tingling where the mark had burned itself into her flesh. She looked down at the baby, the tiny alpha child who was now staring up at her with those impossible gold eyes. The baby smiled, and Rose realized with perfect, terrible clarity that her life had just changed forever. Chapter 2. The mark that changes everything. Rose didn't know how long she sat in the snow, staring at the black mark on her wrist. It couldn't be real. Marks like this didn't appear on wolves like her. The Alpha King's mate mark was the stuff of legends, stories whispered around fires about fated bonds so powerful they could shake the foundations of pack hierarchies. Stories about Lunas who commanded respect with a single glance, who stood beside the most dominant wolf in existence as an equal. Not stories about Omegas who scrubbed floors and emptied slop buckets. The baby cooed softly, pulling Rose back to reality. Right. The baby. The dying infant who'd somehow triggered this impossible mark. Rose scooped the child back into her arms, careful this time not to let their skin touch directly. The baby was still dangerously cold, her lips still tinged with gray, but her eyes were open now. Alert. Those unsettling gold eyes watched Rose with an awareness that seemed far too ancient for an infant. "Who are you?" Rose whispered to the child. "And what did you just do to me?" The baby gurgled and wrapped her tiny hand around a strand of Rose's dark hair. Rose stood on shaking legs and started back toward the pack house. Every step felt surreal, like she was moving through a dream. The mark on her wrist tingled with residual heat, a constant reminder that something fundamental had shifted in the universe. She needed help. Needed someone to tell her what this mark meant, why it had appeared, what she was supposed to do now. But who could she tell? Not Lei. The head Omega would probably accuse Rose of witchcraft or deception. Omegas didn't get mate marks from Alpha Kings, not the Beta Wolves who saw her as furniture. Not Luna Maxine, who barely acknowledged Rose's existence, except to complain about imperfect cleaning. Rose's steps slowed as she emerged from the tree line. The pack house loomed ahead, its windows glowing with warm light. Somewhere inside, the Alpha family slept in their comfortable beds, completely unaware that their lowest-ranked pack member had just been branded by fate itself. A bark shattered the night's silence. Rose froze. 3 wolves materialized from the shadows near the pack house's eastern wing. Patrol wolves. Betas who guarded the territory's borders and kept watch during the night hours. "Who's there?" The lead wolf, a massive gray male, Rose recognized as Beta Daryl Costa, stepped forward, his eyes glowing in the darkness. "Identify yourself." Rose's wolf whimpered and tried to make her submit immediately. But something was different now. The mark on her wrist pulsed with warmth, and her wolf felt steadier, less inclined to roll over and show its belly to every dominant wolf that crossed their path. "It's Rose Forbes," she called out, her voice stronger than she expected. "I found a baby in the woods. She needs help." Daryl closed the distance in 3 long strides. The other patrol wolves, Dave Hansen and Nicholas Warren, flanked him, their expressions hardening when they saw what Rose carried. "What the hell were you doing in the northern woods?" Daryl demanded. His eyes locked onto the baby, and something flickered across his face. Recognition? Fear? "I heard crying," Rose said. She pulled her coat tighter around the infant, shielding the child from the Beta's scrutiny. She was buried in the snow. Someone left her there to die. "Let me see the child." Daryl reached for the baby. Rose's wolf snarled a sound that shocked her as much as it shocked the Betas. Omegas didn't snarl at Betas, didn't refuse direct commands, didn't show teeth to wolves 10 times more dominant. But Rose found herself stepping back, holding the baby tighter. "She's cold," Rose said through gritted teeth. She needs the pack doctor, not an interrogation. Daryl's eyes narrowed dangerously. Did you just refuse? Let her pass. The new voice cut through the tension like a blade. All 4 wolves turned. Luna Maxine Rasmussen stood in the packhouse's doorway, wrapped in a silk robe that probably cost more than everything Rose owned combined. The Luna was beautiful in the way powerful she-wolves always were, tall, elegant, with platinum blonde hair and ice blue eyes that missed nothing. Bring the child inside, Maxine commanded. Now. Rose didn't need to be told twice. She hurried past the stunned Betas and up the packhouse steps. Maxine stepped aside to let her enter, and Rose caught the Luna's sharp inhale when she passed. The mark. Maxine had seen the mark, but the Luna said nothing, just gestured for Rose to follow her deeper into the house. The packhouse's interior was warm, almost stifling after the brutal cold outside. Rose's fingers tingled painfully as feeling returned to them. The baby stirred in her arms, whimpering softly. Maxine led her through halls Rose had cleaned 1,000 times but never truly occupied. Past the formal sitting room with its expensive furniture. Past the Alpha's office with its massive desk and wall of pack history books. Up a flight of stairs Rose had scrubbed on her hands and knees just yesterday. They stopped outside a door Rose had never been allowed to approach. The Alpha's private wing. Wait here. Maxine disappeared through the door without another word. Rose stood in the hallway, clutching the baby and trying not to panic. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The mark on her wrist felt like it was burning again, though when she glanced down, it looked the same as before, black lines forming an intricate pattern of circles and ancient symbols. What was happening? Why had Maxine brought her here instead of to the pack doctor? Voices murmured behind the closed door. Rose's wolf ears strained to hear, catching fragments. Can't be. The mark is genuine. Security breach. Someone got past. The child has Alpha blood. I can smell it from. The door flew open. Alpha Philip Bright strode into the hallway, and Rose's wolf immediately tried to force her to her knees. The Alpha was a mountain of a man, 6.5 feet of pure dominant power with black hair shot through with silver and eyes like molten amber. He radiated authority the way the sun radiated heat, impossible to ignore or resist. Rose locked her knees and stayed upright, barely. Philip's eyes locked onto the baby first, then slowly, deliberately moved to Rose's face, then down to her wrist. The Alpha's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those amber eyes. Shock. Disbelief. And underneath it, all fear. Show me your wrist, Philip said quietly. It wasn't a request. Rose shifted the baby to one arm and extended her left wrist. The mark seemed to pulse in the Alpha's presence, the black lines standing out stark against her pale skin. Philip took her wrist in his massive hand. His touch was surprisingly gentle, his calloused fingers tracing the edge of the mark without actually touching it. Impossible, he breathed, then louder, over his shoulder, Maxine, get Toby, now. The Luna vanished down the hallway at a run, something Rose had never seen the elegant woman do before. Philip released Rose's wrist and focused on the baby. His expression softened fractionally. Where did you find her? Northern Woods, Rose managed. Her voice sounded small in the vast hallway. About half a mile past the tree line. She was wrapped in silk and buried in a snowdrift. How long ago? 20 minutes. Maybe less. Rose looked down at the infant, who was watching the Alpha with those unsettling gold eyes. She wasn't breathing well. I tried to warm her up, and when she touched my hand, she trailed off. How did you explain something you didn't understand yourself? The mark appeared, Philip finished, his jaw clenched. And you have no idea what you're holding, do you? Rose shook her head. Before Philip could respond, footsteps thundered up the stairs. A short, stocky man with wild gray hair and spectacles burst into the hallway, followed closely by Maxine. The pack doctor, Toby Cummings. Let me see her, Toby demanded, already reaching for the baby. This time, Rose's wolf didn't protest. She handed the infant over, and Toby immediately began examining the child with practiced efficiency. He checked her temperature, her breathing, her pulse, peeled back her tiny eyelids to examine her pupils, unwrapped the silk cloth to check for injuries. Hypothermia, Toby muttered. Mild, but she was close. Another 10 minutes. He glanced at Rose. You saved her life. Rose didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Toby rewrapped the baby and straightened. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly serious. Philip. This child has alpha blood. Strong alpha blood. And unless I'm very much mistaken, she's his, Philip interrupted. His amber eyes met the doctor's. She has to be. His? Rose couldn't stop herself from asking. Whose? The three adults exchanged loaded glances. The Alpha King's, Maxine said softly. This child belongs to the Alpha King. The words didn't make sense at first. Then they crashed into Rose's understanding like a freight train. The baby in Toby's arms the infant Rose had found dying in the snow was the daughter of the most powerful wolf alive. The Alpha King who ruled over all packs in the Northern Territories. The male whose very name made lesser wolves tremble. And someone had left his child in the woods to freeze to death. That's impossible, Rose whispered. The Alpha King would never abandon his child. Everyone knows He didn't. Philip cut her off. His expression was grim. Someone took her. Someone breached the king's security, stole his daughter, and dumped her in our territory to die. The implications crashed down on Rose like an avalanche. This wasn't just about finding a baby. This was an act of war. A direct attack on the Alpha King himself. And Rose, worthless, invisible Rose, had just walked straight into the middle of it. Why would they leave her here? Rose asked. Why our territory? To start a conflict, Maxine said. Her ice-blue eyes were hard. If the king's daughter died on Blood Moon lands, he'd assume we were responsible. He'd retaliate. Our pack would be slaughtered within days. Rose's blood ran cold. But she didn't die, Toby said, bouncing the baby gently in his arms. Rose found her in time. Which means we need to return her to the Alpha King immediately. Philip finished. He turned to Rose, his expression unreadable. And you're coming with us. What? Rose took an involuntary step backward. Why me? Philip gestured to her wrist. Because you bear his mate mark. Because somehow when that child touched you, fate itself decided you belong to the Alpha King, and when he sees that mark, the Alpha's jaw clenched. There's going to be hell to pay. 30 minutes later, Rose stood in her pathetic shed, staring at the handful of possessions that constituted her entire life. 2 threadbare dresses, a pair of worn boots, a single blanket with more holes than fabric, a chipped mug she'd salvaged from the pack house trash 5 years ago. This was it. This was everything she owned. And apparently she was about to leave it all behind, to travel to the Alpha King's territory and explain why his mate mark had appeared on the wrist of a nobody Omega. You have 5 minutes. Rose turned to find Beta Daryl Costa standing in her doorway, his expression carefully neutral. The patrol wolf had been assigned to escort her back to the pack house once she'd gathered her things. I don't need 5 minutes, Rose said quietly. She grabbed her spare dress and the blanket, shoving them into a canvas bag that had seen better decades. Daryl watched her in silence for a moment. Then, for what it's worth, I don't think you had anything to do with the child's abduction. Rose looked up sharply. Does anyone think I did? Lee does. Daryl's mouth twisted. She's been spreading rumors since Maxine dragged you into the Alpha's wing. Says you probably stole the baby yourself to get attention. Says Omegas are always looking for ways to rise above their station. Of course Lee was. Rose shouldn't be surprised the head Omega had spent years making Rose's life miserable. Why stop now? What do you think? Rose asked. Daryl shrugged. I think fate works in mysterious ways. And I think that mark on your wrist is going to cause more chaos than anyone's ready for. He stepped aside from the doorway. Come on. Alpha Philip wants to leave within the hour. Rose took one last look at her shed at the place that had been her only refuge for 6 years. Then she followed Daryl out into the night. The pack house was in controlled chaos when Rose returned. Wolves moved with purpose through the halls, preparing for the journey to the Alpha King's territory. Supplies were being loaded into vehicles. Warriors were checking weapons. The air buzzed with tension and barely suppressed fear. Rose followed Daryl to the main foyer, where Alpha Philip stood reviewing maps with several of his top betas. Luna Maxine was there too, dressed in traveling clothes and looking every inch the powerful she-wolf she was. And standing slightly apart from the others, Wrapped in a warm blanket and sleeping peacefully in Toby's arms was the baby, Rose. Philip looked up from his maps. You'll ride with Maxine and me in the lead vehicle. The baby stays with you at all times. Why? Rose couldn't help asking. Wouldn't she be safer with? She's safest with you, Philip interrupted. That mark on your wrist? It appeared when she touched you, which means on some level, metaphysical or otherwise, she recognizes you as her father's mate. She'll be calm with you, compliant. And if we run into trouble on the road? He hesitated. The mark might offer you some protection. Rose doubted that very much, but she nodded anyway. Good. Philip rolled up his maps. We leave in 20 minutes. Stay close to Maxine, and don't talk to anyone about that mark. The fewer wolves who know about this, the better. Rose agreed, and moved to stand beside the Luna, who was reviewing a list on a tablet with swift, efficient swipes. You're handling this better than I expected, Maxine said without looking up. Rose wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she simply said, I don't have much choice. No, Maxine agreed. You don't. She finally looked at Rose, her ice blue eyes assessing. But for what it's worth, you did well tonight. Not many wolves would have gone into those woods alone. Fewer still would have saved the child without thinking of the political implications first. It was the closest thing to a compliment Maxine had ever given her. Rose felt something warm unfurl in her chest, gratitude mixed with surprise. Thank you, Luna. Maxine's expression softened slightly. Then she turned back to her tablet, and the moment was over. Vehicles are ready. Someone called from outside. Philip strode toward the door. Let's move. I want to be on the king's lands before dawn. The pack mobilized with military precision. Rose found herself ushered into a massive black SUV with tinted windows and leather seats that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Maxine slid in beside her, and Toby handed over the baby before climbing into a second vehicle. The infant stirred when Rose took her, those gold eyes opening briefly before closing again. She trusts you, Maxine observed as the convoy began to move. Rose looked down at the tiny face, at the impossible child who'd somehow upended her entire existence in the space of 30 minutes. I don't even know her name, Rose said softly. She doesn't have one yet, Philip said from the driver's seat. His eyes met Rose's in the rearview mirror. Alpha King Gary Fletcher was waiting to name her until her mother chose. But the mother died in childbirth 3 weeks ago. Rose's heart clenched. This baby had already lost her mother. And someone had tried to take her father from her too by leaving her to die. What kind of monster would do this? Rose whispered. The kind who wants to watch the Northern Territories burn? Maxine said grimly. The kind who'd start a war between the Alpha King and every pack in the region just to seize power in the chaos. Rose held the baby tighter and stared out the window as the Blood Moon Pack's territory disappeared behind them. Ahead, in the darkness, lay the Alpha King's lands. And on Rose's wrist, the impossible mark pulsed with warmth, a constant reminder that her life as an invisible Omega was over. Whether she was ready or not, fate had chosen her. Now she just had to survive whatever came next. Chapter 3. When Destiny Knocks at Midnight. The convoy moved through the night like a chain of silent predators. Rose watched the landscape blur past her window, dense forests giving way to open valleys, then climbing back into mountain passes where the snow lay thick and pristine. The baby slept peacefully in her arms, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from every wolf in the vehicle. They'd been driving for 2 hours, and no one had spoken since they left Blood Moon territory. Rose's mind wouldn't stop racing. The mark on her wrist tingled constantly now, a low hum of energy that made her wolf restless and alert. Every few minutes she found herself glancing down at the black lines, half expecting them to have disappeared. Surely this was all some elaborate dream. Surely she'd wake up in her shed, cold and alone, and discover that none of this had happened. But the weight of the baby in her arms was real. The expensive leather seat beneath her was real. And when she looked at her wrist, the mark was still there, stark and undeniable. We're crossing into neutral territory now, Philip said from the driver's seat. His eyes constantly scanned the road ahead and the rearview mirror. Stay alert. If someone was bold enough to steal the king's daughter, they might be bold enough to try finishing the job. Maxine's hand moved to the weapon holstered at her hip. How far to the king's lands? Another hour, maybe less if the roads stay clear. Philip's jaw clenched. I sent word ahead. The king knows we're coming. Rose's stomach dropped. What did you tell him? The truth. Philip's eyes met hers in the mirror again. That we found his daughter. That she's alive and unharmed. And that the wolf who saved her bears his mate mark. How did he react? Rose's voice came out smaller than she intended. Philip's expression darkened. He didn't. The message I got back simply said to bring you both to the king's hall immediately upon arrival. No questions. No elaboration. That couldn't be good. Rose looked down at the sleeping baby and felt her wolf whine anxiously. What if the Alpha King thought she'd had something to do with the abduction? What if he saw the mark as some kind of trick or deception? Omegas didn't become Alpha King's mates. That wasn't how the world worked. Stop spiraling, Maxine said quietly beside her. Rose startled. I wasn't. You were. I can smell the anxiety coming off you in waves. The Luna's ice-blue eyes were surprisingly gentle. Whatever happens when we arrive, remember this, you saved that child's life. You risked your own safety to help someone you didn't know. That counts for something. Even in the Alpha King's court, Rose wanted to believe that. But she'd spent too many years being told that Omegas didn't count for anything to fully trust Maxine's words. The convoy climbed higher into the mountains. The forest pressed close on both sides of the narrow road, branches heavy with snow that occasionally dropped onto the vehicle's roofs with soft thuds. Rose's wolf grew more agitated with each passing mile, sensing they were entering territory far more dangerous than Blood Moon's lands. This was the Alpha King's domain, the seat of power for all northern packs. Wolves who came here uninvited rarely left alive. Contact. Dave Hansen's voice crackled through the vehicle's radio. He was driving the second SUV in the convoy. 3 vehicles approaching from the north. Moving fast. Philip cursed under his breath. Can you identify them? A pause. Then, King's Guard. They're flying the royal banners. Some of the tension drained from Philip's shoulders. Stand down, they're here to escort us. Sure enough, 3 massive black vehicles materialized from the darkness ahead, their headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. They were bigger than Philip's SUVs, armored and clearly built for combat. The lead vehicle pulled alongside them, and Rose caught a glimpse of the wolf driving it. Even through tinted windows, she could feel his dominance. This wasn't just a beta warrior. This was something more, something that made her Omega wolf want to crawl under the seat and hide. The King's Guard vehicle moved in front of them, and the other 2 fell into formation behind the convoy. They were boxed in now, surrounded by the Alpha King's personal warriors. There would be no turning back. The sun was just beginning to rise when they crested the final mountain pass, and Rose got her first glimpse of the Alpha King's territory. She'd heard stories, of course. Every wolf in the northern territories had heard about the king's lands, the vast forests, the mountain strongholds, the pack house that was more castle than residence. But nothing had prepared her for the reality. The valley spread out below them like something from a fairy tale. Dense pine forests blanketed the lower slopes, gradually giving way to open meadows where Rose could see herds of deer grazing in the early morning light. A river cut through the center of the valley, its water dark and swift even in winter. And rising from the northern end of the valley, built into the side of the mountain itself, was the King's Hall. It was enormous. 3 stories of stone and timber that seemed to grow organically from the mountainside, with massive windows that caught the rising sun and threw it back in brilliant flashes of light. Towers rose from each corner, and Rose could see wolves moving along the battlements, guards keeping eternal watch over their king's domain. Goddess, Rose breathed. Impressive, isn't it? Maxine's voice held a note of something Rose had never heard from the Luna before. Awe. I've only been here twice. It's even more overwhelming up close. The convoy descended into the valley on a road that had been carved from the mountainside itself. Rose's ears popped from the altitude change. The baby stirred in her arms, whimpering softly, and Rose automatically began rocking her gently. Shh, she murmured. It's okay, little one. We're almost there. The baby's gold eyes opened and fixed on Rose's face. For a moment Rose could have sworn she saw recognition there, as if this tiny infant knew exactly who Rose was and what the mark on her wrist meant. Then the baby smiled and grabbed Rose's finger with surprising strength. The mark pulsed with warmth. She likes you, Maxine observed. I think she's the only one who will. Rose said quietly. When the Alpha King sees me in Omega wearing his mate mark, he's going to think I'm either a liar or insane. Or he's going to see what fate intended, Maxine countered. You can't fake that mark, Rose. Every wolf who knows the old legends will recognize it for what it is. The question isn't whether it's real. The question is what the king will do about it. That was what terrified Rose most. The convoy passed through a massive gate, set into the valley's natural stone walls. The king's guard wolves manning the gate snapped to attention as the vehicles rolled past, their eyes tracking every movement with predatory focus. Inside the walls, the king's territory was even more impressive. The forests were well maintained, the roads perfectly paved. Rose could see buildings scattered throughout the valley, pack houses, training facilities, what looked like a massive medical center. This wasn't just a pack, this was a city, a kingdom unto itself. And somewhere in that stone fortress ahead, the Alpha King was waiting. The convoy pulled up to the king's hall's main entrance. As the sun finally cleared the mountain peaks, Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. Her mouth had gone dry. The baby seemed to sense her distress and began fussing, her tiny face scrunching up in preparation for a cry. Easy, Rose whispered, bouncing her gently. Please don't cry. Not now. The baby settled slightly, but her gold eyes remained fixed on Rose's face, watching, waiting. Philip put the vehicle in park and turned to face Rose and Maxine. When we go inside, let me do the talking. Rose, keep the baby calm and stay close to Maxine. Don't speak unless the king addresses you directly. Don't make eye contact unless he commands it. And whatever you do, don't show fear. That last one might be difficult, Rose admitted. Philip's expression softened fractionally. I know. But Omegas who show fear to dominant alphas trigger their predator instincts. The king is already going to be on edge. His daughter was stolen and nearly died. He's going to be looking for someone to blame, someone to punish. Don't give him a reason to focus that rage on you. Rose nodded, though her wolf was already trying to force her into submission posture. The vehicle doors opened. The king's guard warriors stood at attention on either side of the entrance, their faces carved from stone. Rose climbed out carefully, cradling the baby against her chest. The air here smelled different. Cleaner somehow. Pine and snow. And something else, something wild and powerful that made Rose's wolf whimper in recognition. Alpha dominance. So thick and overwhelming it was almost tangible. And it was coming from inside the hall. Move. One of the guard warriors commanded. His eyes were flat and cold. The king is waiting. Philip led the way up the massive stone steps. Maxine stayed close to Rose's right side, her presence a small comfort in the overwhelming chaos of sensation and emotion. The hall's main doors were twice Rose's height, and carved with intricate scenes of wolves hunting, fighting, ruling. They swung open silently as the group approached, revealing an entrance hall that took Rose's breath away. The ceiling soared 30 feet overhead, supported by massive timber beams that looked like they'd been carved from single trees. Tapestries depicting the history of the northern packs hung from the stone walls, and at the far end of the hall, up a short flight of stairs, sat a throne carved from black wood and inlaid with silver. The throne was empty, but Rose could feel him, could sense the presence of the wolf who ruled from that seat, the dominance that permeated every stone of this building, every breath of air in this valley. The Alpha King was close. This way. Another guard warrior gestured toward a corridor leading off the main hall. They followed him through passages lit by both modern lighting and ancient torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Other wolves passed them, betas and gammas and even a few alphas, all of whom stopped and stared at the procession. Rose heard whispers following in their wake. That's the Blood Moon Alpha. Why would they bring their Omega here? The baby is that. Impossible. She was taken 3 days ago. The guard warrior stopped in front of a set of double doors carved with the symbol of the Northern Territories, a wolf howling at a full moon. He knocked twice, sharp and precise. Enter. A voice commanded from within. The voice was deep, resonant, and carried so much alpha dominance that Rose's knees nearly buckled. Her wolf threw itself against her mental restraints, trying desperately to force her into a submissive crouch. The doors opened. The room beyond was a study floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a massive desk, comfortable chairs arranged near a fireplace where flames crackled merrily. But Rose barely registered any of it, because standing in front of the fireplace, his back to the door, was the Alpha King. Gary Fletcher was taller than Philip by at least 3 inches, his frame heavy with muscle that spoke of constant training and brutal combat. His hair was dark brown, shot through with silver at the temples, cut short and practical. He wore simple clothes, dark pants and a gray Henley, but the power rolling off him in waves was anything but simple. This was a wolf who could crush other alphas without breaking a sweat. A male so dominant that Rose's Omega wolf was screaming at her to submit, to bare her throat, to acknowledge his superiority in every possible way. "Alpha Philip Bright of the Blood Moon Pack," Gary said without turning around. His voice was carefully controlled, but Rose could hear the rage simmering beneath. "You have something that belongs to me." "Yes, Alpha King." Philip's voice was respectful but steady. "Your daughter. Alive and unharmed." Gary's shoulders tensed. "Where did you find her?" "In the northern woods on the border of my territory, buried in a snowdrift, wrapped in silk. She would have died if. Gary turned then, and Rose got her first look at the Alpha King's face. He was handsome in a brutal, dangerous way. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes that were a startling amber gold, the same color as his daughter's. But it was the expression in those eyes that made Rose's blood run cold. Grief, rage, and a hunger for vengeance that promised blood and death to whoever had dared touch his child. Those terrible eyes swept over Philip, over Maxine, and then landed on Rose, on the baby in her arms, and on the mark visible on her exposed wrist. Gary Fletcher went absolutely still. The rage in his eyes transformed into something else, shock, disbelief, and then a flash of something that looked almost like hope before his expression shuttered completely. "You," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who are you?" Rose's wolf finally won its battle and forced her to her knees. She knelt on the expensive rug, cradling the baby carefully, her head bowed in automatic submission. "Rose Forbes, Alpha King," she managed. "Omega of the Blood Moon Pack." Silence. Then Gary Fletcher crossed the room in 3 long strides and dropped to his knees in front of Rose. His hand shot out and captured her wrist, the one bearing his mate mark. His touch sent electricity racing up Rose's arm, and her wolf threw its head back and howled in recognition. Mate. This was their mate. The one wolf in all the world chosen by fate to stand beside them. Gary's thumb traced the edge of the mark, his touch reverent. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. "How?" Rose finally dared to look up and meet those amber gold eyes. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the grief lines around his mouth. This was a male who'd been through hell and come out the other side barely holding himself together. "I found your daughter in the snow," Rose said quietly. "She was dying. I tried to warm her, and when she touched my hand, she trailed off, not knowing how to explain the inexplicable. The mark appeared," Gary finished. His eyes searched Rose's face as if trying to see into her soul. "And you have no idea what you are, do you?" "An Omega," Rose said, confused. You're not just anything." Gary's hand tightened on her wrist, not painfully, but possessively. "You're my mate, chosen by the moon goddess herself. And that baby you're holding?" His eyes moved to his daughter, and his expression softened with such love that Rose's heart ached. "She recognized you, knew you, called out to fate itself and found you in the darkness." He reached out with his free hand and gently stroked his daughter's cheek. The baby cooed and reached for him, her tiny fingers grasping at his much larger ones. "Hello, my little star," Gary whispered. "Daddy's here. You're safe now. Please like this video if you believe Rose deserves better than a life of servitude and invisibility." The baby gurgled happily and turned to look at Rose, then back at her father, as if introducing them. Gary's eyes met Rose's again, and this time there was wonder in them, and determination. "You saved my daughter's life," he said. "You risked everything for a child you didn't know, and fate marked you as mine." His jaw clenched. "I don't know what the moon goddess has planned, Rose Forbes, but I do know this. No one, not the wolves who took my daughter, not the pack members who'll question your rank, not fate itself is going to take you from me now that I've found you." Rose's breath caught. "Alpha King, I don't understand." "You will." Gary stood, pulling Rose to her feet with him. The baby remained secure in her arms, content and calm. "But first, we need to figure out who tried to murder my child and start a war." and why they chose your territory to dump her in. He turned to Philip, his expression hardening back into the face of a king. Alpha Bright. Tell me everything. Chapter 4. Shadows and Schemes. The Alpha King's study felt smaller with all of them crowded inside. Gary had called in his most trusted advisors, a group of wolves who radiated power and competence in equal measure. Rose recognized the type. Betas and gammas who'd earned their positions through skill and loyalty rather than birth. The kind of wolves who could kill without hesitation but chose instead to serve their king with unwavering devotion. Rose sat in a chair near the fireplace, the baby Gary's daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. The Alpha King had offered to take his child, but the infant had started crying the moment he tried to separate her from Rose. So Rose held her, feeling the weight of every suspicious gaze in the room. She was an Omega, the lowest rank, and yet here she sat in the Alpha King's private study, marked as his mate, holding his most precious treasure. The whispers had already started. Rose could hear them in the minds of the wolves around her, see them in the skeptical glances and narrowed eyes. How did an Omega get the king's mate mark? She must have done something. Used magic or trickery. This can't be legitimate. Gary stood at his desk, his hands braced on the polished wood surface, as Philip recounted the events of the previous night. The Alpha King's face remained impassive, but Rose could see the muscle ticking in his jaw, the only outward sign of the rage building inside him. So someone breached your northern border, Gary said, when Philip finished. Crossed into your territory without triggering any alarms. Dumped my daughter in a snowdrift specifically positioned where she'd be found if anyone bothered to look, and then disappeared without a trace. Yes, Alpha King. Philip's voice was steady, but Rose could smell his anxiety. My patrols found no scent trails, no tracks beyond the immediate area where Rose discovered the child. Whoever did this knew how to move without being detected. Or had help from someone inside your pack, said a woman standing near the window. Rose's eyes snapped to her. She was tall and lean, with short black hair and eyes like chips of obsidian. She wore tactical gear that marked her as a warrior, and the way the other wolves deferred to her suggested high rank. Commander Carrie Eastman, Gary said by way of introduction. Head of my King's Guard. And she's right, this level of stealth suggests either professional training or inside knowledge. Philip's expression darkened. You think I have a traitor in my pack? I think someone wanted the king's daughter found on Blood Moon lands, Carrie said. Her obsidian eyes were cold and assessing. The question is why? What would they gain from implicating your pack in the kidnapping? War. Maxine spoke up from her position near Rose's chair. If the Alpha King believed Blood Moon was responsible for his daughter's death, he'd wipe us out. And in the chaos that followed, with the king focused on vengeance, and the northern packs in disarray, someone could make a play for power. Gary's hands curled into fists on the desktop. Who has the most to gain from destabilizing the northern territories? That's a long list, my king. The speaker was an older male, with gray hair and glasses perched on his nose. He'd been introduced as Toby's counterpart Don Welch, the Alpha King's chief medical advisor and pack historian. You've made enemies consolidating power, the traditional pack alphas who resent answering to a king, the rogues you've driven from the territories, even some of the southern packs who see your influence as a threat. But how many of those enemies could breach my security? Gary pushed away from the desk and began to pace. My daughter was taken from the King's Hall itself, from the nursery wing, which is protected by round-the-clock guards and enough security measures to stop a small army. Whoever did this had access, had knowledge of our protocols, He stopped mid-sentence, his body going rigid. Rose felt it too, her wolf suddenly alert and snarling inside her mind. Something was wrong. Something was. The door to the study burst open. A King's Guard warrior stumbled in, his face pale, and his clothes torn. Blood dripped from a gash on his forehead, and Rose could smell the acrid scent of fear rolling off him in waves. Alpha King, the warrior gasped. We're under attack. The room exploded into motion. Gary was moving before the warrior finished speaking, his body shifting with the fluid grace of a born predator. How many? At least 30 rogues, maybe more. The warrior swayed on his feet, and Carrie caught him before he collapsed. They hit the eastern gate 5 minutes ago. Our guards are holding them off, but they're a distraction, Carrie finished grimly. She looked at Gary. This is too coordinated, too well timed. Someone knew we'd be focused on the Blood Moon delegation, and they're using the chaos to make another move. Gary's amber eyes flashed with lethal intent. He turned to Philip. Get your wolves to safety. Commander Eastman will escort you to the secure wing. With respect, Alpha King, my warriors are at your disposal, Philip said. If your hall is under attack, then I need you and your pack alive to tell the other Northern Alphas what happened here. Gary cut him off. This isn't random. This is the beginning of something bigger. And I need allies who know the truth. He turned to Carrie. Take Alpha Bright, Luna Maxine, and their wolves to the bunker. Full lockdown protocols. No one in or out until I give the all clear. Carrie nodded sharply and gestured to the Blood Moon wolves. This way. Now. But as the group started to move, Gary's eyes landed on Rose, on the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding them. Rose stays with me, Gary said quietly. The room went silent. Alpha King, Carrie began carefully. If this is a coordinated attack, keeping the child here, the child is safest with her father and her fated mate. Gary's voice brooked no argument. And Rose bears my mate mark. That makes her a target now. She stays where I can protect her. Rose's heart hammered against her ribs. Part of her wanted to argue, to point out that she was just an Omega who'd stumbled into this nightmare by accident. But the mark on her wrist pulsed with warmth, and her wolf was strangely calm despite the chaos. Their mate had claimed them, had chosen to keep them close, and some primal part of Rose trusted that more than logic or fear. I'll stay, Rose said quietly. Gary's expression softened fractionally before hardening back into the mask of an Alpha King preparing for war. Dawn. Take Rose and my daughter to the secure nursery, lock it down, and don't open it for anyone except me or Commander Eastman, understood? Yes, Alpha King. Dawn moved to Rose's side and gently touched her elbow. Come with me, child. Quickly now. Rose stood on shaking legs, cradling the baby against her chest. Gary crossed to them in 2 long strides and pressed a kiss to his daughter's forehead. Be safe, little star, he murmured. Then his eyes met Rose's, and the intensity there stole her breath. Keep her safe. And stay alive. We have a lot to discuss when this is over. Before Rose could respond, he turned and strode from the room, already barking orders into a communication device on his wrist. The other wolves followed him, moving with the organized efficiency of a well-trained military unit. Within seconds, the study was empty, except for Rose, Dawn, and the sleeping baby. This way, Dawn said gently. He led her out a different door, one hidden behind a bookshelf that swung open at his touch. The secure nursery is in the heart of the hall. 3 feet of reinforced stone between it and the outside world. If the rogues breach the outer defenses, you'll be safe there. If? Rose's voice came out higher than she intended. Dawn's expression was grim. The Alpha King has never lost a battle, never surrendered ground, never backed down from a challenge. He guided her down a narrow corridor lit by emergency lighting, but he's also never had someone attack his home with his infant daughter inside. This is personal now. And Gary Fletcher is most dangerous when someone threatens what he loves. They descended a flight of stairs that seemed to go down forever. Rose's ears popped from the pressure change. The baby stirred in her arms but didn't wake, her tiny chest rising and falling with peaceful breaths. Finally, Dawn stopped in front of a massive steel door set into solid stone. He pressed his palm against a scanner, and the door hissed open with the sound of releasing air pressure. The room beyond was surprisingly warm and comfortable. Soft lighting, a crib that looked more expensive than Rose's entire shed, comfortable chairs, and shelves stocked with supplies. One wall was dominated by monitors showing various angles of the King's Hall grounds, and on those monitors, Rose could see the battle beginning. Rogues poured through the shattered Eastern Gate wolves in half-shift form, with matted fur and wild eyes. But the King's Guard met them with brutal efficiency, trained warriors who moved like a single organism, cutting down attackers with lethal precision. And at the front of the defense, Rose saw him. Gary Fletcher in full alpha form a massive wolf with dark fur, and those unmistakable amber gold eyes. He tore through rogues like they were made of paper, his jaws snapping bone, his claws rending flesh. Around him, his guard fought with similar ferocity, creating a wall of teeth and fury that the rogues couldn't breach. "He's magnificent, isn't he?" Dawn said softly. He'd come to stand beside Rose, watching the monitors with a mixture of pride and concern. "I've known Gary since he was a pup, watched him grow from an idealistic young wolf into the king he is today. Never once has he failed to protect what matters most." Rose couldn't look away from the screen, couldn't stop watching as Gary fought with a savage grace that was both beautiful and terrifying. This was her mate, this powerful, deadly, dominant alpha, who ruled the Northern Territories with absolute authority, and somehow, impossibly, fate had decided she belonged at his side. "Why me?" Rose whispered. The question had been building inside her since the mark appeared. "I'm nobody. Just an Omega who scrubs floors and empties garbage. Why would fate choose me to be his mate?" Dawn was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Do you know the story of the first Alpha King?" Rose shook her head. 200 years ago, these territories were chaos. Hundreds of small packs, all fighting for resources and dominance. Wolves killed each other over hunting grounds, over insults, over nothing at all. It was a dark time. Dawn gestured to a tapestry on the wall one Rose hadn't noticed before. It depicted a massive white wolf standing on a mountain peak. Then came Balthazar the Uniter. The first wolf powerful enough to force the packs into submission. He became the first Alpha King, and brought peace through strength. "What does that have to do with me?" Rose asked. "Balthazar's mate was an Omega," Dawn said quietly. "A she-wolf named Clara who everyone dismissed as weak and worthless. But Clara had a gift. She could see the good in wolves that others had written off, could find worth in the broken and forgotten. And she convinced Balthazar that true strength wasn't about domination. It was about protection, about lifting up those who couldn't lift themselves." Dawn turned to look at Rose directly. "Clara changed the course of history, made the Alpha King into more than just a conqueror, made him into a leader worth following. And she did it not in spite of being an Omega, but because of it. Because she understood what it meant to be overlooked, to be treated as lesser, to fight for dignity in a world that said you deserved none." Rose's throat tightened. "You think that's why fate chose me? Because I'm an Omega? I think fate chose you because you're exactly what Gary needs." Dawn's smile was sad. He's spent years building power, consolidating control, making the Northern Territories safe through force and fear. But force and fear only go so far. Eventually wolves stop following because they're afraid and start resenting the chains. Gary needs someone who can show him another way. Someone who understands the wolves he rules, the ones at the bottom, the ones struggling, the ones who feel invisible. The baby chose that moment to wake, her gold eyes blinking open and focusing on Rose's face. She didn't cry, just watched Rose with that unnerving intelligence that seemed far too aware for an infant. "What's her name?" Rose asked softly, stroking the baby's cheek. "Gary said he was waiting for her mother to choose. But her mother died before she could." Dawn's expression grew pained. "Sarah was a good woman, strong and kind. She died bringing this little one into the world, and Gary hasn't been the same since. He won't even name his daughter because he feels like doing so without Sarah would be a betrayal." Rose looked down at the tiny face, at the perfect features and those striking eyes. "She needs a name. Every child deserves that. Perhaps you should choose one," Dawn suggested gently. "You're her father's mate, and she clearly trusts you. In the old ways, that would make you her mother by right of the bond." The suggestion sent a shockwave through Rose's system. Her? A mother? She was barely keeping herself alive, had no experience with children, had never imagined herself in that role. But as she held the baby, felt the small weight in her arms and the absolute trust in those gold eyes, something shifted inside her. This child needed protection, needed love, needed someone to fight for her when the world became dangerous. And Rose, worthless, invisible Rose, had spent her entire life being the one who needed protection and never receiving it. She knew exactly what that felt like, the loneliness, the desperation, the bone-deep certainty that no one cared whether you lived or died. She could be better than that, could give this child what no one had ever given her. "Luna," Rose whispered, testing the name. "It means moon, light in the darkness." The baby cooed and wrapped her tiny fingers around Rose's thumb. "Luna Fletcher, Dawn said with a smile. I think Sarah would have approved. On the monitors, the battle was turning. The rogues were retreating, their numbers decimated by the King's Guard's brutal defense. Gary shifted back to human form, his body covered in blood, none of it his own, and began barking orders to his warriors. It's almost over, Dawn said with relief. Gary will want to see you both as soon as it's safe. But Rose couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over at all. The attack had been too convenient. Too well timed. Someone had known the Blood Moon delegation would be here, known the hall would be focused on the baby's return, known exactly when to strike for maximum chaos. This wasn't an ending. This was just the beginning. And as Rose held Luna, the daughter of the Alpha King, the child she'd saved from death, she realized with crystal clarity that her life would never be simple again. She was marked as the Alpha King's mate. She was bonded to his daughter, and whoever had tried to kill Luna once would absolutely try again. Rose just had to figure out who and why before they succeeded. 2 hours later, the all-clear signal finally came. Dawn led Rose and Luna back through the maze of corridors to the main level of the King's Hall. The damage from the attack was visible everywhere. Shattered windows, bloodstains on stone floors, the acrid smell of smoke from fires that had been quickly contained. But the hall still stood. The rogues had been repelled, and Gary Fletcher waited in the main entrance hall, his amber eyes locking onto Rose the moment she appeared. He crossed to her in swift strides, his gaze sweeping over her and Luna with an intensity that made Rose's wolf whimper in submission. You're unharmed, Gary said. It wasn't a question. We're fine, Rose confirmed. Dawn kept us safe. Gary's hand came up to cup her cheek, the gesture so sudden and intimate that Rose froze. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and the mate mark on her wrist flared with heat. Good, Gary said quietly. Then he gently took Luna from Rose's arms, cradling his daughter against his chest with infinite care. The fierce Alpha King melted into a tender father, his expression soft as he murmured words of comfort to the infant. Luna grabbed his finger and gurgled happily. I named her, Rose blurted out, while we were waiting. I hope that's okay. Dawn said you hadn't chosen yet, and she needed. What name? Gary interrupted gently. Luna. It means, I know what it means. Gary's eyes met hers, and Rose saw the sheen of tears he was fighting to contain. Sarah wanted to name her Luna, if she was a girl. I told Dawn I couldn't do it alone. Couldn't make that choice without her mother there. His voice roughened. But you chose it anyway. Chose the name Sarah would have wanted. Rose's breath caught. I didn't know. I swear fate works in mysterious ways. Gary said softly, echoing Dawn's earlier words. He looked down at his daughter, at Luna, and smiled through his grief. Hello, little Luna. Your mother would be so proud of you. The baby cooed and reached for Gary's face, her tiny hands patting his cheeks. Rose watched them, her heart aching with emotions she couldn't name. This should have been a family moment, father and daughter reunited, safe and whole. But there was an empty space where the mother should have been, and Rose felt like an intruder on their grief. Alpha King, she said quietly. I should go back to the Blood Moon delegation. Let you have time with. No. Gary's free hand shot out and caught her wrist, the one bearing his mate mark. You're not going anywhere. We need to talk. About the attack. About who's behind this. And about what happens next. His eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her knees weak. Because whether you're ready or not, Rose Forbes, you're mine now. My mate. Luna's chosen mother. And the wolves who tried to kill my daughter just declared war on both of us. His grip tightened on her wrist, and the mark pulsed with shared heat. So tell me, Rose, are you ready to fight? Rose looked at Luna, at the tiny, perfect baby who'd somehow changed everything with a single touch. Thought about the life she'd left behind in Blood Moon, the shed with no heat, the endless servitude, the casual cruelty from wolves who saw her as nothing. She thought about the mark on her wrist and what it represented. And she thought about Dawn's story about Clara the Omega, who'd changed the course of history by being exactly what the first Alpha King needed. Rose squared her shoulders and met Gary's amber gaze head-on. Yes, she said simply. I'm ready. Chapter 5. The Enemies Within. The war room was exactly what Rose expected, maps covering every wall, a massive table in the center scattered with reports and photographs, and wolves who radiated deadly competence standing at attention around the perimeter. Rose felt desperately out of place. She sat in a chair near the back, Luna sleeping peacefully in her arms, while Gary and his advisors debated strategy and examined evidence from the attack. The Alpha King had insisted Rose be present for the briefing. Despite the uncomfortable glances from his warriors, and the barely concealed skepticism on several faces, an Omega in the Alpha King's war room. It was unprecedented. 37 rogues total, Commander Carey was saying, pointing to photographs spread across the table. We killed 22, captured 12, 3 escaped into the northern forests before we could close the perimeter. The prisoners? Gary leaned over the table, his expression carved from stone. Have they talked? Not yet. Carey's obsidian eyes were cold. But they will. I have interrogators working on them now. I want answers by nightfall, Gary said flatly. Someone organized this attack. Someone funded it, planned it, coordinated it with my daughter's kidnapping. I want names. There's something else, Alpha King. The speaker was a younger male with sandy hair and nervous energy, Nicholas Warren, who'd been introduced as the King's intelligence chief. He pulled a photograph from the pile and slid it across the table. We found this on one of the bodies. Gary picked up the photo. And Rose watched his expression darken dangerously. What is it? Philip asked. The Blood Moon Alpha had been invited to stay for the briefing, along with Maxine and several of his top warriors. Gary turned the photograph around so everyone could see. It was a picture of Luna. The baby Rose now held in her arms. But the photo had been taken recently within the last few days, based on the infant's size and features, and burned into the white border of the photograph, as if seared there with a brand, was a symbol Rose didn't recognize. A wolf's head with its jaws open, surrounded by 3 crescent moons. The Crescent Brotherhood, Maxine breathed. Her ice blue eyes widened. They're supposed to be a myth. They're not. Gary's voice was deadly quiet. They're very real. And very dangerous. Rose found her voice. What's the Crescent Brotherhood? All eyes turned to her. She fought the urge to shrink back, to make herself smaller and less noticeable. But Gary had said she was his mate now. That she belonged here. She had to act like it. An extremist group, Don said gently from his position near the window. They believe in the old ways, pack alphas ruling their territories without interference. Survival of the strongest. Omegas treated as property rather than pack members. They opposed Gary's coronation as Alpha King, and have been working to undermine his authority for years. They're terrorists, Carey added bluntly. They've bombed pack houses, assassinated alphas who support the king, and spread propaganda about returning to the pure ways of our ancestors. We've been hunting them for 3 years. But they operate in cells. Take down one group, 3 more pop up. And now they have my daughter's photograph, Gary said, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the table. Which means they were involved in her kidnapping. Were probably the ones who orchestrated the entire thing. But why dump her on Blood Moon lands? Nicholas asked. If they wanted to kill her, why not just do it? Why the elaborate setup? Because they wanted to start a war, Maxine said quietly. If Luna had died on our territory, the Alpha King would have assumed we were responsible. He would have destroyed Blood Moon Pack, as retribution. And while he was focused on us, distracted by grief and rage, the Brotherhood could have made their move. What move? Rose asked. Gary's amber eyes met hers across the room. A coup. They want to assassinate me and install one of their own as Alpha King. Someone who'll undo everything I've built. The protections for lower-ranked wolves, the laws against pack violence, the unified territories. They want to drag us back to the chaos and bloodshed of 200 years ago. Rose felt Luna stir against her chest. The baby's gold eyes opened and fixed on her father, as if sensing his distress, even from across the room. So what do we do? Philip asked. If the Brotherhood is behind this, they're not going to stop just because their attack failed. They'll try again. We find them first, Gary said with lethal certainty. And we end this, permanently. That's easier said than done, Nicholas pointed out. The Brotherhood's leader, whoever they are, has stayed hidden for years. We don't even know if they're male or female, alpha or beta. They could be anyone, could be in any pack, could be in this room, Carey added darkly. The temperature in the war room dropped several degrees. Gary's eyes swept over every face present, and Rose saw several wolves shift uncomfortably under that amber stare. The implication was clear. If the Brotherhood had managed to breach the King's Hall security and kidnap Luna, they had help from the inside. There was a traitor among them. We proceed carefully, Gary said, after a long moment. Trust no one outside this room. Nicholas, I want background checks on every wolf who had access to the nursery wing in the last month. Carrie, increase security around Luna and Rose. No one gets close to them without my explicit permission. Alpha King. One of the warriors spoke up hesitantly. About the Omega. Rose's stomach dropped. Here it came. The objections. The arguments that she didn't belong here, that an Omega couldn't be the Alpha King's mate, that this was all some elaborate mistake or deception. Choose your next words carefully, Gary said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. Because if you're about to question my mate's legitimacy, we're going to have a problem. The warrior paled. I would never, Alpha King. I was only going to suggest that perhaps, for her own safety, the Omega should return to Blood Moon territory. Keep her out of the Brotherhood's crosshairs until we've neutralized the threat. Gary's expression didn't soften. Rose stays here, under my protection, where I can ensure she's safe. But Alpha King, an Omega in the King's Hall, it's unprecedented. The other packs will talk, will question. Let them question. Gary pushed away from the table and crossed to where Rose sat. He placed one hand on her shoulder, a gesture of possession and protection that made her wolf purr with satisfaction. Rose Forbes is my fated mate. The moon goddess herself chose her, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me personally. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Rose felt the weight of it settling over the room like a physical thing, pressing down on every wolf present until they lowered their eyes in submission. No one argued further. Good, Gary said. Now get to work. I want the Brotherhood's leader identified within 72 hours. Use every resource at our disposal. Call in favors from allied packs. Offer rewards for information. I don't care what it takes, find them. The wolves scattered, moving with renewed purpose. Within minutes, the war room had emptied except for Gary, Rose, Luna, and Dawn, who remained by the window looking thoughtful. Gary knelt beside Rose's chair, his eyes level with hers. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the grief lines that had deepened since Luna's kidnapping, the weight of responsibility that pressed down on him every moment. Are you okay? He asked quietly. The question surprised Rose. No one ever asked if she was okay. Omegas weren't supposed to have feelings that mattered, needs that deserved attention. I think so, Rose managed. It's just a lot. All of this. Yesterday I was scrubbing floors. And now you're caught up in a conspiracy that could destroy the Northern Territories, Gary finished grimly. I'm sorry. You didn't ask for any of this. Neither did she. Rose looked down at Luna, who was watching them both with those two intelligent gold eyes. She's just a baby. She shouldn't have to grow up with people trying to kill her. No, she shouldn't. Gary's hand came up to stroke his daughter's cheek, his touch infinitely gentle. But she's an Alpha King's daughter. Threats and danger will always be part of her life. All I can do is make sure she's strong enough to face them, and loved enough to know she's worth fighting for. Luna grabbed her father's finger and held on tight. Rose watched them, her heart aching. This was what family should look like: a parent's fierce love, a child's innocent trust. Everything Rose had never had, growing up. Her own parents had abandoned her at the Pack orphanage when she presented as an Omega at 13. Too ashamed of their low-ranked daughter to keep her. She'd bounced between foster homes for a few years before ending up in Blood Moon Pack service, where at least she had a roof over her head and regular meals. But she'd never had this. This bone-deep certainty that someone would fight for her, would die to keep her safe. Rose. Gary's voice pulled her back to the present. I need to ask you something. And I need you to be completely honest. Rose's pulse quickened. Okay. Do you want this? Gary gestured between them, then to Luna. This bond. This life. Being my mate means being a target. Means being pulled into politics and danger and situations no Omega should have to face. If you want to go back to Blood Moon, if you want to reject the bond, I won't stop you. I'll make sure you're protected and provided for, but I won't force you into. I want to stay, Rose interrupted. Gary stopped mid-sentence, his amber eyes searching hers. You're sure? No, Rose admitted. I'm terrified. I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know how to be a mate, or a mother, or anything beyond a servant. But, she looked down at Luna, who was watching her with such trust and affection that Rose's throat tightened. But she needs me. And I think maybe I need her too. Need you. Rose's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I've spent my whole life being told I was worthless, that omegas were disposable, and then this tiny baby touches my hand and suddenly fate itself says I'm worth something, that I belong somewhere, with someone. Her eyes met Gary's again, and she saw something flare in those amber depths, hope, desire, and a desperate longing that matched her own. I want to stay, Rose repeated. Stronger this time. I want to fight for her. For you. For whatever this bond means. Even if I'm scared. Even if I don't know what I'm doing. I want to try. Gary was silent for a long moment. Then he reached up and cupped her face in both hands, his thumbs brushing away tears Rose hadn't realized she was crying. You're not worthless, he said fiercely. You're brave and compassionate and stronger than you know. You saved my daughter's life when you could have walked away. You came to a strange territory and stood before an alpha king without backing down. And you just agreed to fight a war you barely understand because you want to protect a child who isn't even yours by blood. His forehead pressed against hers, and Rose felt the mate bond flare between them, a connection deeper than words, more fundamental than logic. You're exactly what Luna needs, Gary whispered. What I need, and I swear to you, Rose Forbes, I will protect you, will fight for you. Will make sure no one ever treats you as less than the treasure you are. You're my mate, my equal. And anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me. The promise in his voice sent shivers down Rose's spine. This was an alpha king's vow, absolute and unbreakable. And for the first time in her life, Rose felt safe. That evening, Rose was given a suite of rooms in the king's private wing. The space was larger than her entire shed back in Blood Moon. A bedroom with a bed so soft Rose was almost afraid to touch it. A private bathroom with heated floors and a tub big enough to swim in. A sitting area with comfortable furniture and windows overlooking the valley. And connected to her suite by a private door, the nursery where Luna slept in her expensive crib, monitored by cameras and protected by guards stationed outside the main entrance. Rose stood in the nursery, watching the baby sleep, and tried to process the surreal turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, she'd been nobody. Now she was the Alpha King's fated mate, sleeping in luxury, protected by the most powerful warriors in the Northern Territories. It felt like a dream, like she'd wake up any moment back in her cold shed, and all of this would evaporate like morning mist. She sleeps peacefully around you. Rose spun to find Gary standing in the doorway, still dressed in the tactical gear he'd worn during the battle. Blood stained his shirt, rogue blood, she reminded herself, and his hair was disheveled from constant running of fingers through it. But his eyes were soft as he looked at his sleeping daughter. I didn't hear you come in, Rose said. Old habit. Moving quietly, Gary crossed to the crib and looked down at Luna. She usually cries when I put her down, wants to be held constantly, but with you, she's calm, content. Maybe she just knows I'm not going anywhere, Rose said softly. Gary's eyes met hers across the crib. Are you settling in okay? If you need anything. This is more than I've ever had, Rose interrupted. Back in Blood Moon, I lived in a converted shed with no heat and a roof that leaked when it rained. This. She gestured to the nursery's warmth and comfort. This is more than I ever dreamed of. Gary's expression darkened. They made you live in a shed? An Omega of their pack? Omegas don't get pack housing, Rose explained. We get whatever space is left over after everyone else is accommodated. Sometimes that's a corner of the servants' quarters. Sometimes it's repurposed storage buildings. We make do. That's going to change, Gary said quietly. His hands gripped the crib's railing, and Rose heard the wood creak under the pressure. When this is over, when the Brotherhood is dealt with, I'm implementing new laws, minimum standards for all pack members, regardless of rank. No one should live in a shed without heat. No one should be treated as disposable. Rose's heart squeezed. You'd do that? Change centuries of tradition because it's wrong. Gary looked at her directly. I've spent years making the territories safer, ending pack wars, stopping senseless violence, but I never thought about the quiet cruelty happening inside pack houses. The way lower-ranked wolves are systematically dehumanized and abused. That ends now. The traditional alphas won't like it, Rose warned. They'll see it as you overstepping, interfering with pack hierarchy. Let them complain. Gary's smile was sharp and dangerous. I'm the Alpha King. They answer to me, and if they have a problem with treating their pack members with basic dignity, they can take it up with my guard. Rose believed him. Believed he would actually do it, would change laws and challenge traditions just because an Omega had told him about living in a shed. The realization made her chest tight with emotion she couldn't name. Thank you, she whispered. Gary moved around the crib until he stood directly in front of her, close enough that Rose could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell his scent, pine and snow, and something uniquely him that made her wolf whine with longing. You don't have to thank me for basic decency, Gary said. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin in a gesture that was becoming familiar. You're my mate, Rose. What hurts you, hurts me. What you need, I'll provide. That's what the bond means. I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Rose admitted. How I'm supposed to act. What a mate does. You be yourself, Gary said simply. That's all I need. Your honesty, your compassion, your strength. His other hand came up so he was cradling her face in both palms. And maybe, eventually, your trust. I know I'm asking a lot. Know you barely know me. But I want you to feel safe here. Want you to know that I'll never hurt you or use you or treat you as anything less than my equal. Rose's eyes burned with unshed tears. Why are you being so kind to me? Gary smiled, a real smile that transformed his stern face into something almost boyish. Because you're mine. And I take care of what's mine. Then he leaned down and pressed his lips to her forehead, a gentle kiss that sent electricity racing through Rose's entire body. The mate mark on her wrist flared with heat, and her wolf threw its head back and howled with joy. Mate. This was their mate. The one wolf in all the world meant for them. When Gary pulled back, his eyes had darkened to liquid amber. Get some rest. Tomorrow we start planning our next move. And Rose? Yes. Welcome home. But as Rose lay in her impossibly soft bed that night, sleep refused to come. Her mind wouldn't stop racing. The attack. The Brotherhood. The conspiracy that was apparently trying to tear down everything Gary had built. And underlying it all, the nagging certainty that something was wrong. Something she was missing. The attack had been too convenient. Too perfectly timed. Someone had known the Blood Moon delegation would be arriving. Had known Luna would be with Rose. Had known exactly when to strike. Which meant the traitor, whoever they were, had access to the Alpha King's private communications, his security briefings, his most sensitive information. Rose sat up in bed, her heart pounding. If there was a traitor close to Gary, then no one was safe. Not her, not Luna, not even the Alpha King himself. She climbed out of bed and padded quietly to the nursery. Luna slept peacefully in her crib, completely oblivious to the danger surrounding them. Rose stood in the doorway, watching the baby's tiny chest rise and fall, and made a silent vow. She would protect this child. Would figure out who was behind the conspiracy. Would make sure Luna grew up safe and loved and free from the threats that haunted her father. Even if it meant putting herself in danger. Even if it meant going against the Alpha King's orders. Because Rose Forbes might be an Omega, might be weak by pack standards, but she was done being invisible. She was done letting others tell her story. And she was done letting evil wolves hurt innocent children. The war was coming, and Rose intended to be ready. Chapter 6. The Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Rose woke to the sound of voices arguing. She sat up in bed, disoriented for a moment by the unfamiliar luxury surrounding her. Then memory crashed back. The Alpha King's hall, the mate bond, Luna sleeping in the nursery next door. The voices were coming from the corridor outside her suite. Rose slipped out of bed and pressed her ear against the door, her wolf's enhanced hearing picking up the heated conversation. Absolutely inappropriate, Alpha King. An Omega in the King's Hall is one thing, but giving her a suite in your private wing, allowing her unrestricted access to your daughter? It sends the wrong message to the other packs. Rose recognized that voice. Lee Key. The head Omega from Blood Moon Pack who'd made Rose's life miserable for years. What was she doing here? The message I'm sending is very clear. Gary's voice was cold as winter steel. Rose Forbes is my fated mate. She has every right to be in this hall, in that suite, and with my daughter, and anyone who questions that can explain themselves to me personally. But surely you understand the optics. What I understand, Gary interrupted, is that you've been spreading rumors about my mate since you arrived with the Blood Moon delegation, questioning her legitimacy, suggesting she somehow manipulated fate or used dark magic to create the mate bond. Would you like to repeat those accusations to my face? A long pause. Then Lee's voice, smaller now. I meant no disrespect, Alpha King. I'm simply concerned about— You're concerned about your own position, Gary said flatly. You held power over Rose in Blood Moon. Made her life hell from what I've been told. And now she's marked as my mate, elevated above you in every possible way, and you can't stand it. That's not— Get out of my sight, Gary commanded. And if I hear one more word, one more rumor, one more snide comment about Rose, you'll find yourself permanently banned from this hall, and every territory I control. Are we clear? Yes, Alpha King. Lay's voice was tight with barely suppressed rage. Rose heard footsteps retreating rapidly down the corridor, then silence. She stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. Lee was here. The woman who'd tormented her for years was in the King's Hall, spreading poison about Rose's bond with Gary. A knock on the door made Rose jump. Rose? Gary's voice was gentler now. I know you're awake. I can hear your heartbeat through the door. Rose took a breath to steady herself, then opened the door. Gary stood in the corridor, dressed in training clothes that showed off the powerful muscles of his shoulders and arms. His hair was damp with sweat, suggesting he'd been working out before the confrontation with Lay. I'm sorry you had to hear that, he said. You defended me, Rose said softly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Gary reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. You're my mate. No one disrespects you. Not in my hall, not anywhere. Rose felt her chest tighten with emotion. Lee has hated me for years. She's not going to stop just because you told her to. Then she'll learn the hard way that I don't make idle threats. Gary's expression hardened. But I need you to do something for me, Rose. I need you to be careful around her. Lee is ambitious and cruel, a dangerous combination. If she's here making trouble, it's not just about jealousy. She wants something. What could she possibly want from me? Information. Access to Luna. Ways to undermine the bond between us. Gary's amber eyes were serious. The Brotherhood needs allies inside this hall. Wolves who can move freely, gather intelligence, create chaos. Lee fits that profile perfectly. Rose's blood ran cold. You think she's working with the Brotherhood? I think everyone is suspect until proven otherwise, Gary said grimly. Which is why I'm assigning you a personal guard. Someone I trust absolutely to keep you and Luna safe. As if summoned, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor. Female, tall, with dark skin and close-cropped black hair. She moved with the fluid grace of a trained warrior, and Rose's wolf immediately recognized the dominance rolling off her. Beta. Strong Beta. Rose Forbes. Meet Janice Buchanan, Gary said. She's been with my guard for 8 years. Saved my life twice. I trust her with everything that matters to me, including you and my daughter. Janice stopped a respectful distance away and inclined her head. Ma'am, it's an honor to serve as your guard. Rose didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called her ma'am before. No one had ever treated her with this level of respect. Thank you, Rose managed. Janice's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. You don't have to thank me. It's my job. And my privilege. Her dark eyes were sincere. Any wolf blessed enough to be chosen by the Moon Goddess as the Alpha King's mate deserves protection and respect. See? Gary said, his hand finding Rose's and squeezing gently. Not everyone questions your worth. Some of us can see exactly how valuable you are. Rose felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. She couldn't afford to be emotional. Not when there was so much danger surrounding them. What do you need me to do today? Rose asked, forcing herself to focus. Gary studied her for a moment, then nodded, apparently satisfied that she was ready to move forward. I need you to attend a meeting with the Northern Pack Alphas. They're gathering this afternoon to discuss the Brotherhood threat and coordinate a unified response. Rose's stomach dropped. You want me there? In front of all the Alphas? I want them to see you, Gary corrected. Want them to witness that you bear my mate mark, that you're legitimate. The more wolves who accept you as my mate, the harder it will be for the Brotherhood to use our bond as a weapon against us. It made sense strategically. But the thought of standing in front of powerful Alpha's wolves who would judge her, question her, possibly reject her, made Rose want to hide in her suite and never come out. I don't know if I can do that, Rose admitted quietly. Gary's hand came up to cup her cheek. Yes, you can. Because you're stronger than you think. And because I'll be right there beside you. Anyone who wants to challenge you will have to go through me first. The promise in his voice steadied Rose's nerves. She took a deep breath and nodded. Okay. I'll do it. Good. Gary pressed a kiss to her forehead, that gentle gesture that made Rose's wolf purr with contentment. The meeting is at 2 this afternoon. Janice will help you prepare. And Rose? Yes. Don't let them intimidate you. You belong in that room just as much as any alpha. More, actually. Because you're mine. The morning passed in a blur of preparation. Janice turned out to be not just a guard but also surprisingly good at helping Rose navigate the complexities of Alpha Court politics. She explained the hierarchy of the Northern Packs, identified which alphas were likely to be supportive versus hostile, and coached Rose on proper etiquette. The most important thing, Janice said as she helped Rose select appropriate clothes for the meeting, is to project confidence even if you don't feel it. Alphas respect strength. They'll test you push to see if you'll back down or submit. You can't let them. But I'm an Omega, Rose protested. My wolf wants to submit to dominant alphas automatically. It's instinct. Your wolf is also mated to the Alpha King, Janice countered. That bond gives you authority that transcends rank. Use it. When you feel that instinct to submit, remember that you carry Gary Fletcher's mark. That makes you untouchable. Rose looked down at the black lines on her wrist, the mate mark that had changed everything. I still can't believe this is real sometimes. It's real, Janice said firmly. She handed Rose a simple but elegant dress in deep blue. And it's permanent. The moon goddess doesn't make mistakes, Rose. She chose you for a reason. Trust in that. Rose changed into the dress, marveling at how the fabric felt against her skin. She'd never worn anything this nice. Never had clothes that weren't threadbare hand-me-downs or service uniforms. Janice styled Rose's dark hair into a simple braid that kept it away from her face, then stepped back to assess her work. Perfect, Janice declared. You look like exactly what you are, the Alpha King's mate. Elegant, dignified, and not to be trifled with. Rose looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The dress flattered her figure, the hairstyle accentuated her features, and there was something different in her eyes, a spark of confidence that hadn't been there before. Maybe she could do this. Maybe she could stand in front of the Northern Alphas and not crumble under their scrutiny. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, Rose called. The door opened to reveal Don, the pack historian, carrying Luna in his arms. The baby was awake and alert, her gold eyes scanning the room until they landed on Rose. Luna immediately reached for her, making urgent babbling sounds. Someone missed you, Don said with a warm smile. He handed the baby over, and Luna settled contentedly against Rose's chest. I've been watching her this morning while you prepared. She's been fed and changed, and she's in a wonderful mood. Thank you, Don. Rose pressed a kiss to Luna's dark hair. The baby smelled like baby powder and milk, innocent and pure and completely trusting. I also brought you something. Don reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. The Alpha King asked me to give this to you before the meeting. Rose opened the box with her free hand. Inside was a ring. Simple silver band inlaid with a black stone that seemed to absorb light, and carved into the stone was the same symbol from Gary's mate mark, the circles and ancient symbols that proclaimed Rose as his chosen mate. It's beautiful, Rose breathed. It's a mate ring, Don explained. In the old traditions, Alpha Kings gave them to their chosen mates as a public declaration of the bond. Gary wanted you to have it before facing the other alphas. A reminder that you don't stand alone. End quote. Rose slipped the ring onto her finger, the hand opposite the mate mark. It fit perfectly, the metal warm against her skin. Thank you, she said softly. Dawn smiled. You're going to do wonderfully, child. I have faith in you. At exactly 2 o'clock, Rose stood outside the Alpha King's Grand Council chamber. Gary waited beside her, dressed in formal clothes that somehow made him look even more imposing than usual. Dark suit, crisp white shirt, and an aura of absolute authority that made Rose's knees weak. Ready? He asked quietly. Rose looked down at Luna in her arms, then at the ring on her finger, then finally at Gary's amber eyes. As ready as I'll ever be, she said. Gary's hand found the small of her back, a gesture of support and possession. Remember what I said. You belong in that room. And anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me. The massive doors to the council chamber swung open. The room beyond was enormous, a circular space with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. Around the perimeter, seated in chairs that looked more like thrones, were the Northern Pack Alphas. Rose recognized Philip Bright from Blood Moon. But the others were strangers, powerful wolves who ruled their territories with absolute authority. All of them turned to look as Gary and Rose entered, and the weight of their collective attention nearly drove Rose to her knees. She felt her wolf whimpering, trying to force her into submission. Felt the instinct to lower her eyes, to make herself smaller, to acknowledge these dominant predators. Then Gary's hand pressed more firmly against her back, and the mate mark on her wrist pulsed with warmth. You belong here, the mark seemed to say. You are mine, and I am the most powerful wolf in this room. Rose lifted her chin and met the Alpha's stares head-on. The room went silent. Gary led her to 2 chairs at the head of the room, positioned on a raised platform that put them slightly above the other Alphas. A deliberate statement of authority. Gary sat first, then gestured for Rose to take the seat beside him. The Alpha King's seat, reserved for his mate, an equal. Rose sat, cradling Luna carefully, and tried to ignore the shocked whispers rippling through the chamber. Thank you all for coming on short notice, Gary began, his voice carrying easily through the vast space. You've all received briefings on the situation, my daughter's kidnapping, and the attack on my hall. What you might not know is that we've identified the organization responsible, the Crescent Brotherhood. Murmurs of alarm spread through the Alphas. The Brotherhood is no longer hiding in the shadows, Gary continued. They've declared open war on my rule and everything I've built, which means they've declared war on all of you as well. This is not just my fight. This is a threat to the stability and safety of every pack in the Northern Territories. What do you propose, Alpha King? Asked an Alpha. Rose didn't recognize a grizzled older male with gray hair and hard eyes. A coordinated response, Gary said. Share intelligence. Pool resources. Identify Brotherhood cells in your territories and root them out. They've been hiding among us for years, recruiting the disaffected and desperate. It's time we took the fight to them. And what about the Omega? Another Alpha called out, this one younger, with an arrogant tilt to his head. Is it true she bears your mate mark? The room fell silent again, all eyes turning to Rose. Gary's expression hardened dangerously. Rose Forbes is my fated mate, chosen by the Moon Goddess herself. Anyone who questions that can examine the mark personally if they're brave enough to risk touching my mate without permission. The threat was clear. The younger Alpha paled and looked away. Show them, Gary said quietly to Rose. Let them see. Rose's heart hammered, but she shifted Luna to one arm and extended her wrist, displaying the black lines of the mate mark clearly. The Alphas leaned forward, studying the mark. Rose heard gasps, murmurs of recognition, and from some grudging acceptance. It's genuine, the older Alpha said finally. I've seen the ancient texts. That's the Alpha King's mate mark, no question. The Moon Goddess has chosen, but she's an Omega. The younger Alpha protested weakly. How can an Omega be fit to stand beside? Are you questioning the Moon Goddess's judgment? Gary's voice was silk over steel. Because that sounds dangerously close to blasphemy. The younger Alpha shut his mouth with an audible click. Rose Forbes saved my daughter's life, Gary continued, found her dying in the snow and brought her back from the edge of death. She's proven herself brave, compassionate, and resourceful. Her rank means nothing compared to her character. And anyone who can't see that isn't worthy of a seat in this council. The declaration hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown. Several alphas nodded slowly. Others looked skeptical but said nothing. And a few, Rose noted with growing unease, looked actively hostile. Now, Gary said, moving on with brutal efficiency. Let's discuss strategy. I've prepared intelligence reports on known Brotherhood activity in each of your territories. Commander Eastman will distribute them. I want responses within 48 hours on what actions you're taking to address these threats. Carrie stepped forward and began handing out tablets to each alpha. As she moved through the room, Rose noticed one alpha in particular, watching her with unusual intensity. Female. Maybe in her late 30s, with blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and ice blue eyes that reminded Rose uncomfortably of Maxine. But where Maxine's gaze held calculation, this alpha's eyes held something colder. Contempt. Rose felt her wolf bristle at the unspoken challenge. Alpha King, the blonde woman said, her voice carrying through the chamber. I have a question about the security breach that allowed your daughter to be taken. How can we trust the protocols you're recommending when your own hall was compromised? Gary's expression didn't change, but Rose felt him tense beside her. That's a fair question, Alpha Doris. The breach is under investigation. We believe it was an inside job, someone with knowledge of our security systems. And have you identified the traitor? Doris pressed. Not yet. But we will. Interesting. Doris leaned back in her chair, a small smile playing at her lips. Because from where I'm sitting, the timing is rather convenient. Your daughter goes missing, and Omega from a minor pack conveniently finds her. Said Omega receives your mate mark under mysterious circumstances. And now she sits in the Alpha King's chair, with access to your most sensitive information and your most precious treasure. Rose's blood ran cold as she realized what Doris was implying. Choose your next words very carefully, Alpha Doris, Gary said, his voice dropping to a deadly growl. But Doris wasn't backing down. I'm simply suggesting that perhaps we should investigate all possibilities, including the possibility that the Omega herself is working with the Brotherhood, that this entire thing, the kidnapping, the mate mark, her presence here is part of their plan. The chamber erupted into chaos. Half the alphas shouted denials. The other half demanded answers. And through it all, Doris sat with that same cold smile, watching Rose like a predator sizing up prey. Gary shot to his feet, and the sheer force of his alpha dominance slammed into the room like a physical blow. Every wolf fell silent, several dropping to their knees under the weight of his power. My mate, Gary said with lethal precision, is not on trial here. She is not under investigation. She is not subject to your suspicions or accusations. Rose Forbes saved my daughter's life at great personal risk. The moon goddess marked her as mine. And I will not tolerate anyone in this council questioning her loyalty or integrity. Is that clear? No one spoke. I asked a question, Gary roared. Is that clear? Yes, Alpha King, the alphas chorused. All except Doris, who met Gary's glare with defiant eyes. Of course. Alpha King, she said smoothly. I meant no offense. I'm simply being thorough. You're being insubordinate, Gary corrected. And you're dismissed from this meeting. Get out. Doris's eyes widened. You can't. I'm the Alpha King. I can do whatever I want. Gary pointed to the door. Leave. Now. Before I have Commander Eastman remove you forcibly. For a moment, Rose thought Doris might argue, might push back and force a confrontation. But then the Alpha stood with rigid dignity and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. As she passed Rose's chair, Doris leaned in close enough to whisper, This isn't over, Omega. I know what you really are. Then she was gone, the doors closing behind her with a resounding boom. Rose sat frozen. Luna clutched against her chest, her heart racing. What did Doris mean? What did she think Rose was? And more importantly, why did Rose have the terrible feeling that she'd just made a very dangerous enemy? Chapter 7. Secrets Buried in Snow. The meeting continued for another 2 hours after Doris's dramatic exit, but Rose barely heard any of it. Her mind kept replaying the Alpha's parting words. I know what you really are. What did that mean? Rose was an Omega. She'd always been an Omega. There was nothing to know beyond that simple, unchangeable fact. Unless Doris knew something about Rose's past. Something Rose herself didn't know. The thought made her stomach churn with anxiety. When the meeting finally adjourned, Gary immediately turned to Rose, his amber eyes searching her face. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Rose lied. Luna had fallen asleep in her arms during the meeting, a warm weight that grounded Rose even as her thoughts spun out of control. Gary clearly didn't believe her, but he didn't push. Instead, he stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, let's get you both out of here." Rose let him help her to her feet, acutely aware of the alphas watching them leave. Some faces held acceptance, now grudging respect for the Omega who'd survived Doris's attack. Others remained skeptical, their eyes following Rose with barely concealed suspicion. And one face in particular made Rose's blood run cold. Lee Key stood in the back of the chamber, having somehow gained entry to observe the meeting. The head Omega's expression was twisted with such hatred that Rose actually stumbled. Gary's hand tightened on hers, steadying her. "Ignore her," he murmured. "She's nothing." But Lei didn't feel like nothing. She felt like a viper waiting to strike. Janice materialized at Rose's side the moment they exited the chamber. "Ma'am." "Alpha King. I've secured the route back to the private wing." "Good," Gary said. "Rose needs rest." "That meeting was a disaster," Rose finished quietly. "Doris practically accused me of being a Brotherhood spy in front of every Alpha in the North. And I shut her down," Gary countered. "No one believes her accusations, Rose. They saw the mate mark. They know it's real. But what if she's right?" The words tumbled out before Rose could stop them. "What if I am somehow connected to the Brotherhood without knowing it? What if they used me?" "Stop." Gary turned to face her fully, his hands coming up to frame her face. "You're spiraling." Doris planted doubt, because that's what she does. "She's been a thorn in my side for years, always questioning my decisions, always pushing back against reforms. This is just her latest attempt to undermine my authority by attacking me," Rose said. "By attacking you," Gary agreed grimly. "Because she knows that hurting you hurts me, but I won't let her win. We're going to figure out what her agenda is, and we're going to stop her." Rose wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that everything would be okay. But Doris's words echoed in her mind. "I know what you really are." Back in her suite, Rose laid Luna in her crib and watched the baby sleep for a long moment. Such an innocent child, so small and vulnerable, and yet already caught up in conspiracies and power plays that could destroy her before she was old enough to understand them. "I won't let them hurt you," Rose whispered. "Whatever happens, I'll keep you safe." Luna stirred but didn't wake, her tiny hand curling into a fist against her cheek. Rose turned away from the crib and found Janice standing in the doorway, her expression troubled. "What is it?" Rose asked. Janice glanced toward the corridor, then stepped fully into the nursery and closed the door. "I need to tell you something. Something that might be important." Rose's pulse quickened. "Okay." "Alpha Doris Conley rules the Frostbite Pack on the northern border," Janice began. "She's been an Alpha for 15 years, ever since she challenged and killed her predecessor. She's ruthless, ambitious, and has never made a secret of her belief that the Northern Territories should return to the old ways, independent packs, no central authority, survival of the strongest. So she hates Gary," Rose said. "She hates what he represents," Janice corrected. "The consolidation of power, the protection of lower-ranked wolves, the idea that an Alpha King should care about things like fairness and justice. To Doris, strength is the only thing that matters. Compassion is weakness." "Why are you telling me this?" Janice met Rose's eyes directly. "Because Doris has a history of making wolves disappear when they become inconvenient. Rivals, challengers, wolves who know too much about her activities. And right now, you're very inconvenient to her plans." Rose felt ice slide down her spine. "You think she's going to try to kill me?" "I think she's going to try something," Janice said carefully. "And I think you need to be prepared. Don't go anywhere without me or another trusted guard. Don't accept food or drink from anyone you don't know. And if Doris, or any of her pack members approach you, get away immediately and alert the Alpha King." Rose nodded slowly, her mind racing. "Does Gary know about this?" He knows Doris is dangerous, but he might not realize how dangerous. She's very good at playing the political game, staying just on the right side of acceptable behavior while working behind the scenes to undermine him. Janice's expression hardened. Janice's. The Alpha King has been focused on external threats like the Brotherhood. He might not see the knife aimed at his back from inside the council. Then we need to warn him, Rose said. We will. But we also need proof. Accusations without evidence will just make Doris play the victim, claim you're paranoid, that you're trying to turn the Alpha King against his own council. Janice crossed her arms. We need to catch her in the act of whatever she's planning. Rose looked back at Luna's sleeping form. How do we do that? We start by figuring out what Doris meant when she said she knows what you really are, Janice said. Because that sounded less like a general insult, and more like she has specific information about you. Information she plans to use against you. Rose's hands clenched into fists. I don't have any secrets. I'm just an Omega from Blood Moon Pack. My parents abandoned me when I presented. I've spent the last 6 years doing menial labor. There's nothing interesting or important about my past. Maybe not, Janice said slowly. Or maybe there's something you don't know about yourself. Something that was hidden from you. The suggestion sent chills through Rose's body. Like what? I don't know. But I think it's time we found out. Janice moved toward the door. Stay here with Luna. I'm going to contact someone who might be able to help a friend who specializes in pack genealogies and hidden bloodlines. If there's something unusual about your heritage, she'll find it. Janice, Rose called as the guard reached the door. Thank you. For protecting me. For believing in me. Janice smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed her stern face. You're the Alpha King's mate, Rose. That makes you family. And I protect family. Then she was gone, leaving Rose alone with her thoughts, and a sleeping baby who had somehow become the center of her entire world. That night, Rose couldn't sleep. She lay in her enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning through everything that had happened. Doris's accusations, Lee's hatred, the Brotherhood conspiracy, the traitor somewhere in Gary's inner circle, and underlying it all the nagging question. What am I? Around midnight, Rose gave up on sleep and padded quietly to the nursery. Luna was awake, her gold eyes reflecting the soft nightlight glow. But the baby wasn't crying, just watching the mobile spinning slowly above her crib. Can't sleep either? Rose whispered. She lifted Luna from the crib and settled into the rocking chair near the window. I don't blame you. Today was a lot. Luna made a soft cooing sound and grabbed Rose's finger. The mate mark pulsed with warmth. A constant reminder of the bond connecting Rose to Gary, to this child, to a life she'd never imagined possible. Your father thinks I'm brave, Rose told Luna quietly. But I'm not. I'm terrified. Terrified of messing this up. Of not being good enough for you. Of letting you down when you need me most. Luna's eyes seemed to focus on Rose's face with that too intelligent gaze. I never had a family, Rose continued. My parents threw me away like garbage when I became an Omega. No one wanted me. No one cared if I lived or died. And now suddenly I'm supposed to be your mother? Supposed to stand beside the most powerful wolf in the Northern Territories? Supposed to face down alphas and conspiracies and enemies I don't even understand? Tears slipped down Rose's cheeks. I don't know how to do any of this, Luna. I don't know how to be what you need. Luna's tiny hand reached up and patted Rose's wet cheek. A gesture so tender and innocent that Rose's heart cracked open. But I'll try, Rose whispered. I'll try so hard. Because you deserve better than what I had. You deserve love and protection, and a mother who'll fight for you no matter what. And maybe I can't be everything you need, but I can be that. I can love you. I can protect you. I can make sure you never feel unwanted or abandoned or invisible. She pressed a kiss to Luna's forehead. I promise you that, little one. No matter what happens, no matter what Doris says, or what the Brotherhood tries, or what secrets come crawling out of my past, I will never abandon you. You're mine now, and I take care of what's mine. The words echoed Gary's from earlier, and Rose felt the rightness of them settle into her bones. This was what the mate bond meant. This was what family meant. Not blood, or rank, or predetermined destiny, but choice. The choice to stand beside someone, to fight for them, To love them even when the world said you shouldn't. Rose rocked Luna gently, humming a lullaby she'd heard other mothers sing but never thought she'd sing herself. The baby's eyes drifted closed, her breathing evening out into the peaceful rhythm of sleep. And for a moment, just a brief, perfect moment, Rose felt at peace. Then the window exploded inward. Glass shattered across the nursery as a dark figure dove through the opening. Rose screamed and rolled out of the rocking chair, clutching Luna against her chest. She hit the floor hard, her shoulder taking the impact, but she kept the baby secure. The figure landed in a crouch male, dressed in black, face covered by a mask. In his hand, a knife gleamed in the dim light. "Give me the child," the intruder growled. "Give her to me and I'll let you live." Rose's wolf surged forward with protective fury, her canines lengthened, and she felt her eyes flash with her wolf's presence. "Get away from us," the intruder lunged. Rose threw herself sideways, still protecting Luna. The knife slashed through the air where she'd been, close enough that Rose felt the wind of its passage. "Guards!" Rose screamed as loud as she could. "Guards! Intruder!" The man cursed and came at her again. This time Rose couldn't dodge fast enough. The knife caught her upper arm, slicing through fabric and skin. Pain exploded through her body, but Rose didn't let go of Luna. She kicked out blindly, her foot connecting with the intruder's knee. He grunted and stumbled, buying Rose precious seconds to scramble backward toward the door. But he recovered faster than she expected. His hand shot out and grabbed Rose's ankle, yanking her off balance. She hit the floor again, Luna screaming in her arms, blood from Rose's wound staining the carpet. "I said, give me the child." The intruder raised his knife for a killing blow. The nursery door exploded open. Gary Fletcher burst through like an avenging god, his eyes blazing gold with his wolf's fury. He didn't shift, didn't need to. His bare hands grabbed the intruder by the throat and slammed him against the wall hard enough to crack the stone. "You touched my mate," Gary snarled. "You threatened my daughter. Give me one reason why I shouldn't tear you apart right here." The intruder struggled, choking, his knife clattering to the floor. Behind Gary, Janice and 3 other guards poured into the room, weapons drawn. "Secure him," Gary commanded, never taking his eyes off the intruder's masked face. "And get the pack doctor. Rose is bleeding." Only then did Gary release the intruder, letting him collapse gasping to the floor. The guards immediately swarmed him, binding his hands and yanking off his mask. Rose didn't recognize the face revealed young, maybe mid-20s, with cold eyes and a mouth twisted in a sneer. "Who sent you?" Gary demanded, kneeling beside Rose and gently checking her wound. His hands were surprisingly gentle despite the rage still rolling off him in waves. "Who ordered you to take my daughter?" The intruder spat blood and smiled. "You'll never stop us, King. The Brotherhood is everywhere. We're in your hall, in your council, closer than you think. And we will have that child. She's the key to everything." Gary's hand clenched on Rose's arm, not painfully, but possessively. "Get him out of my sight before I kill him." Janice and her team dragged the intruder from the nursery, his manic laughter echoing down the corridor. Then Gary turned his full attention to Rose, his amber eyes swept over her, cataloging injuries, assessing damage. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" "Just my arm," Rose managed. Luna was still crying in her grip, and Rose tried to soothe the baby even as her own wound throbbed with pain. "Luna's fine. I kept her safe. You did more than that." Gary gently took Luna from Rose's arms and passed her to Dawn, who'd appeared in the doorway. Then he swept Rose up into his arms, as if she weighed nothing. "You fought off an assassin while protecting an infant. You're a goddamn hero." Rose wanted to argue, wanted to point out that she'd barely survived, that the intruder would have killed her if Gary hadn't arrived. But exhaustion and shock were crashing over her in waves, and she found herself sagging against Gary's chest. "I've got you," Gary murmured into her hair. "You're safe now. I've got you." He carried her out of the nursery, past guards who were already securing the broken window and examining the room for evidence, down the corridor to what Rose dimly recognized as Gary's personal suite, the Alpha King's bedroom. Gary laid her on his massive bed and immediately began examining her wounded arm. The cut was deep but not life-threatening. Blood had soaked through her nightgown sleeve, turning the fabric dark. "The doctor's on his way," Gary said, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. "But I'm going to clean this first. It's going to hurt." "I don't care," Rose said. She was still shaking, adrenaline making her muscles twitch. "Luna is Luna. Luna is with Dawn and surrounded by guards. She's safe." "You saved her, Rose. You saved my daughter." Gary pressed a clean cloth against her wound, and Rose hissed at the sting. "I'm sorry. I should have had more security on your suite. Should have anticipated." "You can't be everywhere at once," Rose interrupted. "And the intruder was right. The Brotherhood is in your hall. They knew which room was the nursery, knew the guard rotation, knew exactly when to strike." Gary's jaw clenched. "Which means our traitor is someone with access to sensitive information. Someone close enough to know the layout of the private wing. Someone on your council," Rose said quietly. "Maybe even someone who was at today's meeting." Their eyes met, and Rose saw the same terrible conclusion reflected in Gary's amber gaze. "Doris," they said in unison. The pack doctor arrived and stitched Rose's wound with efficient competence, gave her something for the pain, and declared she'd be fine with rest. But Rose couldn't rest, couldn't stop replaying the attack in her mind. After the doctor left, Gary dismissed all the guards except Janice, who took up a position outside his bedroom door. Then he sat on the edge of the bed and took Rose's uninjured hand in both of his. "I need to tell you something," Gary said quietly. "Something I should have told you before." Rose's heart sank. "What?" "After Sarah died, after I lost my mate and almost lost Luna in childbirth, I swore I'd never let anyone get close again. Never risk that kind of pain. I threw myself into ruling, into making the territories safe, into anything that would distract me from the grief." Gary's thumb traced circles on Rose's palm. "And then you appeared, bearing my mate mark, proving that fate had other plans, that I wasn't done living, wasn't done loving, wasn't done hoping for something beyond duty and responsibility." Rose's throat tightened. "Gary, but I also knew," he continued, "that being my mate would make you a target, that the enemies I've made would see you as a weakness to exploit. I knew it, and I still brought you here. Still claimed you publicly. Still put you in danger." "That's not your fault," Rose protested. "Isn't it?" Gary's eyes were haunted. "That intruder came for Luna. But he was willing to kill you to get to her. And if I hadn't reached you in time, if I'd been even 30 seconds slower..." He cut himself off, his voice breaking. Rose reached up with her good arm and cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "But you weren't. You got there in time. You saved us. And I'm not going anywhere, Gary. I told you I'd fight for Luna." "For you?" "I meant it. Even knowing what it costs?" Gary asked. "Even knowing you might die because of this bond?" "Especially knowing that," Rose said fiercely. "Because for the first time in my life, I have something worth dying for. Someone who sees me as more than worthless. Someone who makes me feel like I matter." Gary's forehead pressed against hers, and Rose felt the shudder run through his powerful body. "You matter more than you know. More than I can put into words. And I swear to you, Rose Forbes, I will find every wolf who wants to hurt you, every conspirator, every traitor, every Brotherhood member who thinks they can take what's mine, and I will make them pay in blood." The promise was dark and violent, and absolutely sincere, and Rose believed every word. "First we need to prove Doris is involved," Rose said practically. "We need evidence." "Janice is working on that," Gary said. "She has contacts investigating Doris's pack, looking for Brotherhood connections. And the intruder we captured, he'll talk eventually. They always do." "What did he mean when he said Luna is the key to everything?" Rose asked. Gary pulled back slightly, his expression troubled. "I don't know. But it's the second time someone said that. The Brotherhood isn't just trying to kill Luna out of revenge. They need her for something, and until we figure out what, she's in constant danger. Then we don't let her out of our sight," Rose said simply. "We protect her together." Gary smiled, a real smile that transformed his face from stern ruler to the father and mate he was beneath the crown. "Together. I like the sound of that." He leaned down and kissed her. Not the gentle forehead kisses he'd been giving her, but a real kiss, claiming and tender and full of promise. The mate bond flared between them, golden warmth that chased away the darkness and fear. When they finally pulled apart, Rose was breathless and her heart was racing for entirely different reasons than terror. Stay here tonight, Gary said quietly. In my bed. Let me keep you safe. Rose nodded, suddenly exhausted down to her bones. What about Luna? Dawn is bringing her here. She'll sleep in the crib I had moved into my room earlier today. Gary helped Rose settle against the pillows, careful of her injured arm. From now on, we're a family unit. You, me, and Luna. All in the same quarters where I can protect you both. Rose felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears this time. A family, Gary confirmed. He pressed another kiss to her forehead. Now rest. You've earned it. I'll stay awake and keep watch. Rose wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could help stand guard. But the pain medication was kicking in, and exhaustion was pulling her under like a dark tide. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Gary's face, fierce and protective, and full of a love so intense it took her breath away. I'm home, Rose thought as consciousness faded. Finally, I'm home. But in the shadows of the King's Hall, Doris Conley smiled as she received the report of the failed assassination attempt. Good. Let the Omega think she was safe. Let her believe Gary's protection was enough. Soon enough. She'd learn the truth. Some secrets couldn't be buried forever. And Rose Forbes's secret, the one Doris had spent weeks uncovering, was about to destroy everything. Chapter 8. The bloodline that refused to die. Rose woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of Luna's happy babbling. For a moment, she was disoriented. This wasn't her suite. The bed was bigger, the ceiling higher, the scent surrounding her distinctly masculine pine and snow and something uniquely Gary. Memory crashed back. The attack. The intruder. Gary carrying her to his bedroom and promising to keep her safe. Rose sat up carefully, mindful of her injured arm. The wound throbbed dully, but the pain medication had done its job. She was sore, but functional. Across the room, Gary sat in a chair near Luna's crib, the baby in his arms. He was shirtless, his powerful torso marked with scars that told stories of battles won and survived. And he was smiling, genuinely smiling, as Luna grabbed his finger and tried to stuff it in her mouth. "Good morning," he said when he noticed Rose watching. "How are you feeling?" "Like I got stabbed and then passed out in the Alpha King's bed," Rose said. Then her eyes widened. "I mean, not that I didn't mean to imply." Gary's smile widened into a grin. "Relax. You're my mate. You're exactly where you belong." He stood and carried Luna over to the bed, then sat beside Rose. "And you're allowed to be in my bed anytime you want. In fact, I insist on it from now on. You and Luna both stay here where I can protect you." Rose felt heat rise in her cheeks, but she didn't argue. The truth was, she felt safer here than she had in her own suite. Being close to Gary made her wolf content in a way nothing else did. Luna reached for Rose, and Gary carefully handed the baby over. The infant settled against Rose's chest with a contented sigh, her gold eyes blinking sleepily. "She slept well," Gary said. "Better than she has in weeks, actually. Dawn thinks it's because she can sense you nearby. Feels secure. She's not the only one," Rose admitted quietly. Gary's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. The mate mark on Rose's wrist pulsed with warmth where their skin touched. "I meant what I said last night. You're not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, we face it together." Before Rose could respond, a sharp knock interrupted them. "Alpha King," Janice's voice came through the door. "I have news. It's urgent." Gary stood immediately, his entire demeanor shifting from tender mate to commanding Alpha King. "Come in." Janice entered, her expression grim. In her hands, she carried a tablet and a manila folder. "We got the intruder to talk. Took most of the night. But Commander Eastman's interrogators are very persuasive." "What did he say?" Gary demanded. "The attack was ordered by the Brotherhood, specifically by someone he knows only as the Voice, the Brotherhood's leader. But there's more." Janice glanced at Rose, and something flickered in her dark eyes. Concern. Sympathy. The Voice didn't just want Luna. They wanted information about Rose. Specifically, they wanted to know if she'd started manifesting any unusual abilities. Rose felt her blood run cold. "What kind of abilities? That's what we need to figure out." Janice handed the tablet to Gary. Because the intruder also said something very interesting. He said the Brotherhood has been searching for someone like Rose for years. Someone with her bloodline. What bloodline? Gary's voice was sharp. Rose is an Omega from Blood Moon Pack. There's nothing special about. That's what I thought too. Janice interrupted. Until I had my contact dig into Rose's genealogy. She opened the manila folder and spread several documents across the bed. Rose, what do you know about your parents? Rose's throat tightened. Not much. They gave me up when I presented as an Omega, left me at the Pack orphanage with nothing, no explanation, no family history. Just a note saying they couldn't keep a daughter who'd brought shame to their family. What were their names? Janice asked gently. Thomas and Margaret Forbes. They were both betas in Blood Moon Pack. Or at least, that's what I was told. Janice and Gary exchanged loaded glances. What? Rose demanded. What aren't you telling me? Janice pulled out a document, an official-looking certificate with elegant script. This is your birth certificate, the original, not the modified version that was filed with Blood Moon Pack records. Rose took the document with shaking hands. The names in the parents section made her breath catch. Mother, Margaret Forbes Beatty. Father, unknown. I don't understand, Rose whispered. Thomas Forbes isn't my father. Thomas Forbes isn't listed on your original birth certificate, Janice said carefully. Which suggests your mother had an affair, or was involved with someone she couldn't publicly acknowledge. Someone whose identity needed to be hidden. Why would she hide it? Rose asked. Because your biological father was someone important, Gary said, reading over Rose's shoulder. His voice had gone very quiet, very controlled. Someone whose involvement with a beta female would have caused a scandal. Someone from the royal bloodline, Janice finished. She pulled out another document, this one older, yellowed with age. Rose, have you ever heard of the Silver Moon line? Rose shook her head numbly. The Silver Moons were the ruling family before the Alpha Kings, Gary explained. His hand had tightened on Rose's shoulder, an anchor in the storm of revelations. 200 years ago, they were the most powerful wolves in the Northern Territories. They had abilities that went beyond normal wolf traits. Enhanced healing, prophetic dreams, the ability to influence other wolves through will alone. But they died out, Janice continued. Or so everyone believed. The last known Silver Moon was killed in the wars that led to Balthazar becoming the first Alpha King. The bloodline was declared extinct. But it wasn't, Rose breathed, understanding dawning with horrible clarity. You think I'm descended from the Silver Moons? We don't think, Janice said quietly. We know. She placed a final document in Rose's hands, a DNA analysis report. I had your blood tested, compared it against samples from historical Silver Moon artifacts. The match is 98% certain. You carry their bloodline, Rose. You're one of the last living descendants of the royal family. The room spun. Rose clutched Luna tighter, her injured arm screaming in protest. But she barely felt it past the roaring in her ears. That's impossible, Rose said. I'm an Omega. I'm nobody. I can't be. You presented as an Omega, because that's what often happens with diluted royal blood, Gary said. His voice was gentle but firm. The Silver Moons were alphas, powerful, dominant alphas. But when their bloodline mixed with beta or lower genetics over generations, the offspring sometimes presented as Omegas. It's a defense mechanism. A way for the bloodline to survive undetected. The Brotherhood knows this, Janice added. That's why they're hunting you. The Silver Moon bloodline had the potential to challenge the Alpha King's authority. If someone with Silver Moon blood fully manifested their powers, they could overthrow the current regime, Gary finished, his jaw clenched. They could rally wolves who believe in the old ways, who think the Silver Moons should have remained in power instead of being conquered by the Alpha Kings. Rose felt like she might be sick. So the Brotherhood wants to use me? To put me on some kind of throne? Not you, Janice said carefully. Luna. The name hung in the air like a death sentence. Gary went very, very still beside Rose. Explain. Think about it, Janice said. Luna is the Alpha King's daughter. She carries your bloodline, which is the strongest in the Northern Territories. But when the mate bond formed between you and Rose, something changed. The mark appeared not just because of romance or fate, but because Luna's bloodline recognized Rose's bloodline. called out to it. You're saying Luna has Silvermoon blood? Gary's voice was dangerous now. Through the mate bond? I'm saying Luna might be the first wolf in 200 years to carry both the Alpha King bloodline and the Silvermoon bloodline, Janice said. The intruder said she was the key to everything. This is why. She's the bridge between the old power and the new. And whoever controls her, whoever shapes her as she grows, could control the future of every pack in the Northern Territories. Rose looked down at the baby sleeping peacefully in her arms. Sweet, innocent Luna, who had no idea she'd just become the most valuable wolf in existence. They'll never stop coming for her, Rose whispered. The Brotherhood, Doris, anyone who wants power, they'll hunt her forever. Yes, Gary said simply. They will. Which is why we need to move first. Need to figure out who the Brotherhood's leader is and eliminate the threat before Luna is old enough to be used as a pawn. But how? Rose asked. We don't even know who the voice is. Actually, Janice said slowly, I might have a lead on that. Both Gary and Rose turned to stare at her. Janice pulled up something on her tablet and turned it to face them. After the intruder mentioned abilities, I started thinking. The Silvermoons were known for their prophetic dreams, the ability to see possible futures. Rose, have you ever experienced anything like that? Dreams that felt too real? Visions of things that hadn't happened yet? Rose opened her mouth to say no, then stopped. She had been having dreams. Strange, vivid dreams that she dismissed as stress and exhaustion. Dreams of wolves she didn't recognize, of battles that hadn't been fought, of Luna, older, with silver light pouring from her eyes as she stood before an army. Maybe, Rose admitted, but they're just dreams. Nightmares from all the stress. Describe them, Gary commanded gently. So Rose did. She told them about the recurring dream of a female wolf, with platinum blonde hair and ice blue eyes, not Maxine, but someone who looked similar. Someone who stood in a room full of shadows and gave orders to figures Rose couldn't quite see. Someone whose voice sent chills down Rose's spine even in sleep. As she spoke, Janice pulled up a photograph on her tablet. Is this the woman from your dreams? Rose looked at the image and felt her blood turn to ice. It was Doris Conley. That's her, Rose breathed. That's the woman I keep seeing. She's always surrounded by shadows, always giving orders, always talking about. Rose stopped abruptly, memory crystallizing. About what? Gary pressed. About the Omega who would ruin everything, Rose said quietly. About how I needed to be eliminated before I could awaken. Before I could remember what I was and challenge her plans. She looked up at Gary. Horror dawning. It wasn't just a dream, was it? I was seeing the future. Seeing Doris planning my death. Or seeing the present, Janice said grimly. Prophetic dreams don't just show the future, they sometimes show what's happening right now in places you can't physically see. Rose, I think you've been unknowingly using your Silvermoon abilities to spy on the Brotherhood. And Doris is the voice. The revelation landed like a bomb. Gary was on his feet immediately, his phone already in his hand. Commander Eastman, assemble a team. We're arresting Alpha Doris Conley on charges of treason and conspiracy. Do it quietly, but do it now. I want her in custody within the hour. He listened for a moment, his expression darkening. Then, what do you mean she's gone? Rose felt her stomach drop. When? Gary demanded. How long has she been missing? He listened again, then slowly lowered the phone. His amber eyes met Rose's, and she saw fear there for the first time since they'd met. Doris left the hall 3 hours ago, Gary said quietly. Claimed she was returning to her territory. But her vehicle never arrived at Frostbite Pack lands. She's vanished. And according to Carrie's scouts, she took 12 of her most loyal warriors with her. She knows we're onto her, Rose said. She knows I've been seeing her in my dreams. Knows we figured out she's the voice. Which means she's going to accelerate her plans, Janice said. Whatever the Brotherhood was building toward, whatever they need Luna for, they're going to try to take her now, before we can stop them. Gary turned to face Rose fully. I need you to do something, and you're not going to like it. Rose's grip tightened on Luna. What? I need you to try to dream again. Deliberately. Use whatever gift you have to find Doris, to see where she's hiding, what she's planning, who else is working with her. Gary's expression was torn between protective mate and desperate Alpha King. I know it's dangerous. Know that if Doris realizes you're watching her, she might be able to hurt you somehow, but we're running out of time and options." Rose looked down at Luna, who had woken and was watching her with those two intelligent gold eyes. The baby who carried both Alpha King blood and Silver Moon blood. The child who would be hunted for her entire life, unless they stopped the Brotherhood now. "How do I do it?" Rose asked. "How do I control the dreams?" "You don't control them," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone spun to find Don standing there, his expression grave. "You surrender to them. Let the gift take you where it needs to go." The Silver Moons didn't force their visions, they opened themselves up and trusted the Moon Goddess to show them what they needed to see. "That sounds incredibly vague and unhelpful," Rose said. Don smiled sadly. "That's because prophetic gifts are vague and unhelpful. They show you pieces of truth wrapped in symbolism and metaphor. Your job isn't to understand everything you see. It's to remember every detail, so we can interpret it afterward." "And if Doris attacks me while I'm vulnerable?" Rose asked. "If she realizes I'm spying on her and strikes back? Then I'll pull you out," Gary said firmly. He sat beside her on the bed and took her hand. "I'll be right here, the entire time, anchoring you, keeping you safe. And if anything goes wrong, if I sense danger, I'll wake you immediately." Rose wanted to argue, wanted to say this was insane, that she wasn't ready, that surely there had to be another way. But Luna made a soft cooing sound and grabbed Rose's finger, and Rose knew there was no other choice. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll try." They prepared quickly. Janice cleared the room of everyone except Gary, Dawn, and herself. They positioned Rose comfortably on the bed with Luna sleeping peacefully in her crib nearby. Gary sat beside her, one hand clasping hers, providing that anchor he'd promised. "Close your eyes," Dawn instructed. "Take deep breaths. Let your mind drift. Think about Doris, picture her face, hear her voice, feel your anger at what she's done. Let those emotions guide you." Rose did as instructed. She closed her eyes and focused on Doris's ice blue stare, the cold contempt in her voice, the threats veiled as concerns. "I know what you really are." Rose let the anger rise. Let the fear and protectiveness and desperate need to keep Luna safe wash over her. And then she let go. The world shifted. Rose felt herself falling through darkness, tumbling through space and time. Then suddenly she was standing not in Gary's bedroom, but in a place she'd never seen before. A cave. Deep underground, lit by torches that cast dancing shadows on rough stone walls. And in the center of the cave, surrounded by wolves in dark clothing, stood Doris. "Long enough," Doris was saying. "The Omega has awakened her gifts. The Alpha King knows I'm involved. We're out of time." "Then we move to the final phase," said another voice. Male. Familiar, but Rose couldn't quite place it. A figure stepped into the torchlight, and Rose's breath caught. It was Beta Daryl Costa from Blood Moon Pack, the patrol wolf who'd found Rose the night she'd discovered Luna. "You've already positioned your wolves inside the King's Hall," Daryl said. 20 Brotherhood members disguised as servants, guards, advisors. When you give the word, they'll strike, kill the Alpha King, take the child, and install you as the new Alpha Queen with the Silver Moon heir under your control. "What about the Omega?" another wolf asked. Female voice, but Rose couldn't see her face. "She's the wild card," Doris admitted. "With her Silver Moon blood, she could theoretically challenge my authority. Unite wolves who believe in the old bloodline." She smiled coldly. "So we'll give her a choice. Join us and live as a figurehead queen while I hold the real power. Or refuse and watch her precious Luna die slowly while she's forced to observe." Rage surged through Rose. Her vision flashed red, and she felt her presence in the dream becoming more solid, more real. Doris's head snapped up. Her ice blue eyes seemed to look directly at Rose even though Rose wasn't physically there. "She's watching," Doris hissed. "The Omega is here. I can feel her presence." The wolves scattered, looking around wildly. Rose tried to back away, tried to retreat from the vision, but Doris was already moving. The Alpha's hand shot out and grabbed something, a talisman, on a chain around her neck. The symbol carved into it glowed with sickly green light. "Dark magic," Dawn's voice echoed from somewhere far away. "Rose, get out," She's using dark magic to track you. But it was too late. Doris was chanting something in a language Rose didn't recognize. And the green light from the talisman grew brighter, forming a beam that shot across the distance between them. Pain exploded through Rose's skull. She screamed in the dream and in reality as the dark magic slammed into her mind. Rose! Gary's voice. Desperate and terrified. Rose felt herself being pulled in two directions. Gary trying to wake her, Doris trying to trap her in the vision. The dark magic wrapping around her consciousness like chains. You should have stayed hidden, little Omega. Doris's voice was inside Rose's head now. Should have remained ignorant of what you are. Now you forced my hand. Now you die. The green light intensified. Rose felt it burning through her mind, seeking her connection to her physical body. If it found that connection, if it severed the thread linking her consciousness to her flesh, she would die. Her body would remain alive but empty, a shell with no soul to inhabit it. No, Rose screamed. She reached deep inside herself, past the pain and fear, searching for something, anything that could fight back. And she found it. Deep in her bloodline, buried under years of suppression and denial, was power, Silvermoon power. The gifts of her ancestors waiting to be claimed. Rose grabbed that power and pulled. Silver light exploded from her in the dream, and in reality. It slammed into Doris's dark magic like a tidal wave hitting a wall, shattering the green light and severing the connection. Doris screamed. Impossible. You're an Omega. You can't. I'm a Silvermoon, Rose snarled. Her voice in the dream echoed with power and authority she'd never felt before. And you will not hurt my family. The silver light surged forward, and Rose felt the vision beginning to collapse. But before it did, she saw one more thing. A map on the cave wall, marking a location in the northern mountains. And written beneath it in Doris's handwriting, primary target, King's Hall, secondary target, Blood Moon Pack, final phase, dawn, 3 days. Then the dream shattered, and Rose was falling again back through darkness, back through space and time. Rose's eyes snapped open. She was back in Gary's bedroom, her body covered in sweat, her injured arm throbbing viciously. Gary was leaning over her, his face pale with fear, his hands gripping her shoulders. Rose, can you hear me? I'm here, Rose gasped. I'm okay. I saw Gary. I saw everything. She told them. About Doris and Daryl, about the Brotherhood members already inside the King's Hall, about the plan to attack in 3 days, about the cave and the map and the dark magic Doris had tried to use to kill her, and about the silver light. About claiming her Silvermoon power for the first time. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Gary pulled her into his arms and held her so tightly Rose could barely breathe. You scared me, he said roughly. Your eyes turned silver, and you started screaming, and I couldn't wake you. I thought I'd lost you. I'm sorry, Rose whispered into his chest. But we know now. We know who the traitors are. We know when they're going to attack. We can stop them. Yes, Gary said. He pulled back, and Rose saw the transformation on his face from terrified mate to coldly furious Alpha King. We can. And we will. He looked at Janice. Round up every Brotherhood member Rose saw in her vision. Do it quietly. Use only wolves. I've personally vetted. I want them all in custody by nightfall. And Daryl? Janice asked. Send word to Alpha Philip. Tell him he has a traitor in his pack. Tell him, Gary's jaw clenched. Tell him the Blood Moon Alpha needs to be very careful about who he trusts. Janice nodded, and left to carry out her orders. Gary turned back to Rose. You did it. You gave us the information we needed to end this. We still have to find Doris, Rose pointed out. And stop whatever she's planning. We will. Because you're going to lead us right to her. Gary's smile was sharp and dangerous. You've seen her hiding place. Can you find it again? Lead my warriors there. Rose thought about the cave. The torches. The feeling of being deep underground in the northern mountains. Yes, she said. I can find it. Good. Gary pressed a kiss to her forehead. Then we hunt. And this time, the Brotherhood won't see us coming. Chapter 9. When Silver meets Shadow. The war room had never felt so tense. Gary stood at the head of the table, his commanders arranged around him in a tight circle. Maps covered every surface, marked with positions, routes, and strategic points. And at Gary's side, for the first time in Alpha King history, stood an Omega. Rose traced the route she'd seen in her vision, her finger following the mountain passes to a location deep in the northern wilderness. Here. The cave system is here. I'm certain of it. Commander Carey leaned forward, studying the map. That's deep in contested territory. Technically unclaimed land between 3 pack borders. Smart choice for a hideout. No pack has jurisdiction, no regular patrols. How many fighters can she have there? Gary asked. Based on what Rose saw, maybe 30, Carey said. But Doris is smart. She'll have sentries posted, escape routes planned. A direct assault would be costly. Then we don't assault directly, Gary said. His amber eyes gleamed with cold calculation. We split into 3 teams. Team 1 creates a distraction at the main entrance. Team 2 comes in through the secondary tunnels here and here. He marked 2 positions on the map, and Team 3, my team, goes straight for Doris. And Rose? Janice asked carefully. Everyone turned to look at her. Rose felt the weight of their scrutiny but refused to shrink beneath it. She'd spent too many years making herself small and invisible. Not anymore. Rose comes with my team, Gary said flatly. Alpha King, Carey began carefully. With all respect, taking your mate into combat. Rose is the only one who can identify all the Brotherhood members by sight. Gary interrupted. She saw them in her vision. Saw their faces. And more importantly, her presence will rattle Doris. Make her sloppy. The voice has spent weeks planning how to kill or capture Rose. She won't expect Rose to walk into her stronghold willingly. It's a risk, Carey said. Everything is a risk, Gary countered. But Rose has proven herself capable. She fought off an assassin while protecting Luna. She used her Silvermoon gifts to spy on the Brotherhood. She's stronger than any of you realize. His hand found Rose's shoulder. And she's coming with me. Final word. No one argued further. When do we move? Nicholas asked. Tonight, Gary said. We have 3 days until Doris planned to attack. But now that she knows we're onto her, she might accelerate her timeline. We strike first, we strike hard, and we end this before the Brotherhood can regroup. What about the traitors in the hall? Janice asked. The 20 Brotherhood members Rose saw in her vision. I've already sent word to my most trusted guards, Gary said. They're being rounded up as we speak. Quietly. No alarms raised. By the time we leave for the mountains, every Brotherhood spy in this hall will be in custody. And Daryl Costa? Rose asked quietly. The betrayal still stung. She'd thought the Blood Moon Beta was one of the good ones. Alpha Philip is handling that personally, Gary said grimly. I received word an hour ago. Daryl has been arrested and is being interrogated. Apparently the Brotherhood recruited him 2 years ago by threatening his family. He's been feeding them information ever since. Rose felt a pang of sympathy despite the betrayal. The Brotherhood was insidious, finding pressure points, exploiting weaknesses, turning good wolves into traitors through fear and coercion. How long until we leave? Rose asked. 4 hours, Gary said. That gives us time to gear up, brief the teams, and move into position before nightfall. The darkness will be our ally. The commanders dispersed to prepare their teams. Soon, only Gary, Rose, and Janice remained in the war room. You don't have to do this, Gary said quietly once they were alone. I meant what I said. You're capable and strong. But I also know this isn't what you signed up for when the mate bond formed. If you want to stay here with Luna, stay safe while we handle Doris. No, Rose interrupted firmly. I'm coming. Luna stays here under guard, protected by wolves we trust absolutely. But I'm going with you. Why? Gary asked. Not challenging, just genuinely curious. Rose looked down at the mate mark on her wrist, the black lines that had changed her entire existence. Because Doris made this personal. She tried to kill your daughter. Tried to kill me. She wants to destroy everything we're building here. The safety, the reforms, the idea that wolves like me deserve dignity and respect. I'm not letting her win. She met Gary's amber gaze directly. And because I'm done being the victim. Done being the wolf things happen to. I want to be the wolf who makes things happen. Who fights back. Who protects what she loves. Gary's expression softened with pride and love so intense it made Rose's chest ache. You've always been that wolf. You just didn't know it yet. He pulled her close and kissed her deep and claiming and full of promise. The mate bond flared between them, golden warmth that chased away fear and doubt. When they finally pulled apart, Gary pressed his forehead against hers. Stay close to me during the fight. Don't take unnecessary risks. And if things go wrong, if it looks like we're going to lose, you run. You get out of that cave and you get back to Luna. Understood? Understood, Rose agreed. Though privately she had no intention of running if Gary was in danger. Mates protected each other. That went both ways. 4 hours later, Rose stood in tactical gear that Janice had procured for her. The clothing was reinforced but flexible, designed for movement and protection. Boots that gripped securely, gloves that left her fingers free for dexterity, and a vest with pockets containing basic medical supplies and a communication device. Rose barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like a warrior, like someone who belonged on a battlefield instead of scrubbing floors. You ready for this? Janice asked, checking Rose's gear one final time. No, Rose admitted. But I'm doing it anyway. Janice smiled, that rare, genuine expression that transformed her stern face. That's what courage is. Not the absence of fear, but acting despite it. They left Rose's suite and made their way through the hall's corridors. The building felt different tonight, quieter, more alert. Guards stood at every junction, their eyes scanning constantly for threats. The 20 Brotherhood spies had been arrested without incident, but the air still hummed with tension. Luna was in the most secure location in the hall, a reinforced safe room deep underground, protected by Dawn and 6 of Gary's most loyal warriors. Rose had said goodbye to the baby an hour ago, pressing kisses to her tiny forehead and whispering promises to come back safe. Luna had grabbed Rose's finger and smiled, as if she understood perfectly and had complete faith in her chosen mother. The memory gave Rose strength as she descended to the hall's lower levels where Gary's strike team was assembling. 30 wolves total. All of them Gary's best warriors who'd proven their loyalty in countless battles. They wore tactical gear similar to Rose's, and they moved with the confident efficiency of wolves who'd trained together for years. Gary stood at the center of them, giving final instructions. He'd changed into combat gear as well, and he looked every inch the warrior king, powerful, dangerous, absolutely unstoppable. His eyes found Rose immediately, tracking her movement through the crowd until she reached his side. Team assignments, Gary said, addressing the group. Commander Eastman leads the distraction team. She'll draw Doris's sentries away from the main entrance and keep them occupied. Lieutenant Nicholas Warren leads the secondary infiltration team. He'll secure the escape routes and make sure no Brotherhood members slip away. I'm leading the primary strike team. Our target is Doris herself. He gestured to Rose. Rose Forbes is with my team. She can identify Brotherhood members on site and she has abilities that will be crucial to the mission's success. Anyone who has a problem with an Omega joining this strike can speak now or forever keep their peace. Several warriors glanced at Rose with curiosity, but no one objected. Word had apparently spread about Rose's Silvermoon heritage and her prophetic gifts. Some wolves looked at her with newfound respect, others with wariness. Rose lifted her chin and met their gazes steadily. She belonged here. The mate mark on her wrist and the silver power thrumming in her bloodline said so. Good, Gary said. We move in 10 minutes. Check your gear, confirm your team assignments, and remember we're not just fighting for the Northern Territories tonight. We're fighting for the future, for the right of every wolf, regardless of rank, to live free from fear and tyranny. The Brotherhood wants to drag us back to the darkness. We're going to show them that the light is stronger. The warriors raised their fists in silent solidarity. Rose felt her wolf surge forward with fierce pride. This was her pack now, her family, her army, and together, they would win. The journey to the northern mountains took 3 hours. They traveled in convoy, armored vehicles moving through the darkness with headlights off, navigating by moonlight and enhanced wolf vision. Rose sat in the lead vehicle with Gary and 6 other members of the primary strike team. No one spoke. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Rose watched the landscape blur past her window, dense forests giving way to rocky terrain, then climbing into the mountains where snow lay thick and pristine. They were far from civilization now. Far from laws and witnesses and the safety of packlands. Out here the strong survived and the weak died. Rose had been weak for so long. Had spent years believing that was her fate, to be overlooked, dismissed, eventually discarded. But the mate mark on her wrist pulsed with warmth, and she felt the silver power of her Silver Moon heritage humming just beneath her skin. She wasn't weak anymore. She was a Silver Moon, the Alpha King's mate, Luna's chosen mother. And she was done letting others write her story. The convoy stopped in a clearing 2 miles from the cave system. The teams dispersed quickly and efficiently, each group moving to their assigned positions. Gary's hand found Rose's in the darkness. Stay close, stay alert, and trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Rose nodded, her throat too tight for words. They moved through the forest like shadows, 30 wolves flowing between trees without making a sound. Rose's enhanced senses picked up everything. The crunch of snow under boots, the whisper of wind through branches, the distant howl of wild wolves that weren't part of any pack. And underneath it all, a feeling of wrongness, of dark magic tainting the natural world. Doris was close. Rose could feel her presence like oil on water, unnatural and invasive. They reached the cave entrance just as Carrie's distraction team made their move. Explosions echoed through the mountains, flash grenades and smoke bombs creating chaos at the main entrance. Shouts and snarls erupted as Doris's sentries rushed to respond to the perceived attack. Now, Gary whispered. His team slipped through a secondary entrance that Rose had identified from her vision, a narrow crack in the mountainside, barely wide enough for wolves to squeeze through single file. The passage descended sharply, taking them deep underground where the temperature dropped and the air grew thick with the smell of earth and stone. And blood. Old blood that had soaked into the cave floor over years of dark rituals. Rose's wolf whined in distress, but she pushed forward. Not for herself. For Luna. For Gary. For every wolf who'd ever been told they were worthless because of their rank. The passage opened into a larger chamber, the same one Rose had seen in her vision. Torches flickered along the walls, casting dancing shadows. And in the center of the chamber, surrounded by a circle of Brotherhood members, stood Doris. The Alpha's ice-blue eyes locked onto Rose immediately. Well, Doris said, her voice echoing off stone walls. The little Omega walked right into my trap. How? Predictable. Gary stepped forward, positioning himself between Rose and Doris. It's over, Doris. Your spies in my hall are in custody. Your plan to attack in 3 days is known. The Brotherhood is finished. Is it? Doris smiled coldly. She raised one hand, and the Brotherhood members around her shifted, revealing the wolves they'd been hiding. Hostages. At least 20 wolves bound and gagged, their eyes wide with terror. Rose recognized several of them servants from the King's Hall. Pack members from Blood Moon. Even a few children who couldn't have been older than 12. You kill me, Doris said conversationally. And my followers kill the hostages. Every single one. Including the pregnant female over there who's about to give birth any day now. She pointed to a she-wolf whose swollen belly was obvious, even in the flickering torchlight. Gary went very still. Let them go. Your fight is with me, not innocent pack members. My fight is with everything you represent. Doris snarled, her pleasant mask cracking. You and your weak reforms. Your pathetic concern for lower-ranked wolves. Your belief that compassion is strength rather than the fatal flaw it truly is. She turned her glare on Rose. And you, the Omega who thinks she's special because she has some ancient bloodline. You're an abomination. A genetic anomaly that should have been culled at birth. The Silver Moons were conquered for good reason. They were too soft to rule. Too concerned with justice and mercy to do what needed to be done. And what needs to be done? Rose asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Murder? Terror? Enslaving wolves who can't fight back? Survival, Doris said simply. The strong rule. The weak serve or die. That's the natural order. That's what our ancestors understood before the Alpha Kings corrupted everything with their sentimentality. You're insane, Gary said flatly. I'm practical. Doris's hand moved to the talisman around her neck, the same one Rose had seen in her vision, the one glowing with sickly green light. And I'm prepared. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate you finding me? That I wouldn't plan for every contingency? The talisman pulsed, and dark magic flooded the chamber. Brotherhood members drew weapons, not just claws and teeth, but actual weapons, blades infused with silver, guns loaded with silver bullets, the kind of arsenal that could kill even the most powerful alphas. "Here's how this is going to work," Doris said. "The hostages go free, I go free. And in exchange, I'll leave the Northern Territories and never return. Refuse, and everyone in this cave dies, including your precious Omega." Gary's jaw clenched. Rose could feel his rage through the mate bond, hot and fierce and barely controlled. But she could also feel his calculation. He was running scenarios, trying to find a way to save the hostages and stop Doris simultaneously. There wasn't one. Not without casualties. Unless... Rose felt the silver power surge inside her bloodline. Felt it responding to the dark magic Doris wielded. Silver moon gifts versus corrupted power. Light versus shadow. And Rose realized what she had to do. "I have a better offer," Rose said, stepping out from behind Gary. "Rose, no." Gary reached for her, but Rose slipped past his grasp. She walked toward Doris, her hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "Let the hostages go. Let Gary and his team leave, and I'll stay. I'll join the Brotherhood. I'll be your Silvermoon figurehead queen. Isn't that what you wanted? Someone with royal blood to legitimize your rule?" Doris studied her with narrow-eyed suspicion. "Why would you do that?" "Because those people don't deserve to die for your ambition," Rose said simply. "Because I'm done watching innocent wolves suffer. Because..." She looked back at Gary, her heart breaking at the anguish in his amber eyes. "Because some things are worth sacrificing for." "Rose, don't," Gary said, his voice rough. "Don't do this." "I have to," Rose said softly. "For Luna. For the Northern Territories. For every Omega who needs the reforms you're implementing to survive." She turned back to Doris. "Do we have a deal?" Doris smiled, a genuine smile full of malice and triumph. "We have a deal." She gestured, and the Brotherhood members surrounding the hostages lowered their weapons. "Release them. Let them and the Alpha King's team leave. But the Omega stays. She's mine now." The hostages were unbound and ushered toward the exit passage. Gary's warriors escorted them. But Gary himself didn't move. He stood frozen, staring at Rose with devastation written across his face. "Gary," Rose said gently. "Go. Please. Take care of Luna. Tell her I love her." "I'm not leaving you," Gary said hoarsely. "You have to," Rose said. "For Luna. For your pack. For everything you've built. I'm just one wolf. Not worth all those other lives." "You're not just one wolf," Gary said fiercely. "You're my mate. My equal. I know," Rose whispered. "And that's why you have to trust me now." She looked at him, really looked at him, and poured everything she felt through the mate bond. Not goodbye, not surrender, but a promise. "Trust me. I have a plan." Gary's eyes widened fractionally. He felt it too. Felt Rose's certainty and determination, and the silver power building inside her bloodline like a coming storm. "Go," Rose said aloud. "Now, before she changes her mind." Gary held her gaze for one more long moment. Then he nodded once sharp and pained and turned to his team. "Fall back, we're leaving." "But Alpha King," one of the warriors protested. "Now," Gary roared. The team retreated, following the hostages up the exit passage. Within minutes, the chamber was empty except for Rose, Doris, and the Brotherhood members. Doris smiled and raised the talisman. "You made this so easy, little Omega. Did you really think I'd let you live? That I'd accept you as an ally?" Dark magic flooded from the talisman, wrapping around Rose like chains. "No," Rose said quietly. "I thought you'd do exactly this." She stopped fighting the silver power inside her, stopped suppressing it, stopped being afraid of what she might become if she fully embraced her Silvermoon heritage, and she let it explode. Silver light erupted from Rose's body like a supernova. It slammed into Doris's dark magic and shattered it like glass. The talisman around Doris's neck cracked, green light sputtering and dying. The Alpha staggered backward, shock and fear replacing her smug confidence. "Impossible. You're an Omega. You can't." "I'm a Silvermoon," Rose said. Her voice echoed with power that made the cave walls tremble. "And you made a fatal mistake, Doris. You thought rank mattered more than bloodline. You forgot that my ancestors ruled these territories for thousands of years before the Alpha Kings ever existed. The silver light intensified. Rose felt her wolf surge forward, not weak and submissive anymore, but powerful and dominant. The Omega presentation had been a mask, a defense mechanism hiding the true strength of her bloodline, but the mask was gone now, and Rose Forbes was done hiding. Brotherhood members rushed forward to defend Doris, but the silver light expanded to meet them. Where it touched, wolves fell not dead, but unconscious. Overwhelmed by the sheer force of Silvermoon dominance, Doris shifted fully into her wolf form, a massive white wolf with ice-blue eyes. She lunged at Rose, jaws snapping for her throat. Rose didn't shift. Didn't need to. She raised one hand, and the silver light formed a barrier between them. Doris slammed into it and bounced back, snarling with rage. "You can't beat me," Doris growled. "I've trained for decades. I'm an alpha. You're nothing," Rose said quietly. "Nothing but a bully who mistook cruelty for strength, who thought dominating others made you powerful, who never understood that true power comes from protecting those weaker than yourself." The silver light pulsed, and Rose felt her consciousness expanding, felt herself connecting to something vast and ancient, the collective wisdom of every Silvermoon who'd come before her. Her ancestors reaching through time to lend her their strength. "You are worthy," they whispered. "You are strong. You are exactly what we always were, a shield for the vulnerable, a voice for the voiceless, a light in the darkness." Rose embraced that truth and let the silver light surge forward one final time. It wrapped around Doris's wolf form, not to kill but to bind, to suppress, to strip away the dark magic that had been tainting her for years. Doris screamed a howl of rage and terror that echoed through the caves. Then the white wolf collapsed, shifting back to human form. Unconscious, defeated, powerless. The chamber fell silent except for Rose's ragged breathing. She stood in the center of a circle of unconscious Brotherhood members, silver light still emanating from her body in soft waves. Every wolf in the cave had been neutralized without a single death. Footsteps pounded down the passage. Gary burst into the chamber, his warriors close behind. He'd heard the commotion and doubled back despite Rose's orders to leave. His amber eyes swept the scene, the fallen Brotherhood members, the unconscious Doris, and Rose standing in the center of it all, glowing with silver light, like an avenging angel. "Rose," Gary breathed. "You did it. You actually did it." The silver light flickered and died. Rose swayed on her feet, suddenly exhausted down to her bones. "I told you to trust me." Then her knees buckled. Gary caught her before she hit the ground, sweeping her up into his arms. "I've got you. You're safe now. You did it, Rose. You saved everyone." Rose managed a weak smile before consciousness began to fade. Luna is safe," Gary assured her. "Dawn sent word. She's fine, and she's waiting for her mother to come home." Her mother. Rose held on to that thought as darkness pulled her under. She was a mother now, a mate, a Silvermoon, and she'd won. Chapter 10. The Dawn of a New Era. Rose woke to the sound of Luna's laughter. For a moment, she lay still, letting the sweet sound wash over her. Then memory returned: the cave, the confrontation, the silver light exploding from her body as she'd finally embraced her Silvermoon heritage. She opened her eyes to find herself back in Gary's bedroom, their bedroom now, she supposed. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden, and sitting in a chair beside the bed, holding Luna and making silly faces that had the baby giggling with delight, was Gary. "You're awake," he said softly when he noticed Rose watching. Relief flooded his amber eyes. "Thank the moon goddess. You've been out for 2 days." 2 days? Rose tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Every muscle in her body screamed in protest. "Easy." Gary stood and gently helped her into a sitting position, Luna still secure in one arm. "Dawn says it's normal. You channeled more power than your body was ready for. You need rest and time to recover." Luna reached for Rose with grabbing hands, and Gary carefully transferred the baby over. The moment Luna settled against Rose's chest, the infant let out a contented sigh and grabbed Rose's finger. Rose felt tears prick her eyes. "I was afraid I'd never see her again. Never get to hold her." "You almost didn't," Gary said quietly. He sat on the edge of the bed, his hand finding Rose's free one and gripping tightly. When you walked toward Doris, offered to trade yourself for the hostages, Rose, I thought my heart would stop. Thought I was watching you sacrifice yourself, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I had to, Rose said. Those wolves didn't deserve to die for Doris's ambition. And I knew I could feel the silver power building inside me. Knew that if I could just get her to lower her guard for one moment, I could unleash it. It was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed, Gary said. And the most terrifying. You took on an entire room of Brotherhood members alone and won. Neutralized them all without killing anyone. Rose, do you understand what that means? Rose shook her head, still feeling foggy from 2 days of unconsciousness. It means you're not just carrying Silvermoon blood, Gary explained. You're manifesting their gifts at a level we haven't seen in 200 years. The power you displayed, the ability to subdue multiple wolves at once without harming them, that's what the old stories describe. What made the Silvermoons legendary? He reached up and cupped her cheek. You're not an Omega, Rose. You never were. The moon goddess just hid your true nature, until you were ready to claim it. Then what am I? Rose asked. You're a Luna, Gary said simply. Not just my mate, not just Luna's mother, but a true Luna, the female alpha who stands beside the king as his equal, who wields power in her own right, who protects the pack through strength and compassion combined. Rose looked down at the baby in her arms, the child who shared her name. Does this mean? Does Luna have the same gifts? The same power? Dawn thinks so, Gary said. She carries both my alpha bloodline and your Silvermoon heritage. As she grows, she'll likely manifest abilities we can't even imagine yet. His expression grew serious, which means she'll need someone to teach her. Someone who understands Silvermoon power and can help her control it. Me, Rose breathed. I'll have to teach her. If you're willing, Gary said. I know this is a lot. Know you're still processing everything that's happened. But Rose, the Northern Territories need you. Need someone who understands what it's like to be overlooked and dismissed. Who can speak for the wolves who have no voice. Who can show us a better way forward. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to the mate mark on her wrist. I need you. Not just as my mate, but as my partner. My equal. The Luna who'll help me build something better than what came before. Rose felt the weight of responsibility settling over her shoulders. Just weeks ago, she'd been a nobody. An Omega scrubbing floors and dreaming of nothing beyond survival. Now she was being asked to help shape the future of every wolf in the Northern Territories. It should have been terrifying. Should have been overwhelming. Instead, Rose felt a sense of rightness settle into her bones. This was what she'd been meant for. What the moon goddess had been preparing her for through every hardship, every humiliation, every moment of despair. Yes, Rose said simply. I'll do it. I'll stand beside you. Help you build something better. Teach Luna to use her gifts for good instead of domination. Gary's face lit up with joy and relief so profound it made Rose's heart ache. He leaned forward and kissed her deep and claiming and full of promise. The mate bond flared between them, golden warmth intertwining with silver light. When they finally pulled apart, Rose asked, What happened to Doris? To the Brotherhood? Gary's expression hardened. Doris is in custody, awaiting trial before the Council of Northern Alphas. She'll be found guilty. We have enough evidence to bury her 10 times over. The sentence for treason is death. Rose felt conflicted about that. Part of her, the part that still remembered being an Omega, still carried the scars of years of abuse, wanted Doris to suffer. But another part, the part connected to her Silvermoon heritage, whispered about mercy and second chances. What about the other Brotherhood members? Rose asked. Most are in custody. A few escaped, but without Doris's leadership, they're scattered and leaderless. Gary's hand tightened on hers. Carrie and Nicholas are tracking them down. Within a month, the Brotherhood will be completely dismantled. And the hostages? The wolves Doris was threatening to kill? Safe. All of them. Thanks to you. Gary smiled. You're a hero, Rose. Word has spread throughout the Northern Territories about what you did. About the Omega, who turned out to be a Silvermoon Luna, and saved dozens of lives without spilling a drop of blood. Every alpha is talking about you. Every pack member is asking questions about the old bloodline. Rose's stomach churned with anxiety. What kind of questions? Whether the Silvermoons should reclaim power, Gary said honestly. Whether you have a right to challenge my authority as Alpha King. Whether the territories should return to being ruled by the old bloodline instead of the new. Rose's eyes widened. I would never, Gary. I don't want to challenge you. I don't want power for its own sake. I just want— I know, Gary interrupted gently. I know you don't want to overthrow me. But others will try to use you for that purpose. Will try to position you as a rival or alternative to my rule. We need to be prepared for that. How? Rose asked helplessly. By presenting a united front, Gary said. By making it clear that you stand with me, not against me. That the Silvermoon bloodline and the Alpha King bloodline are united through our mate bond and through Luna. He hesitated. Which is why I'm proposing we formalize our bond, make it official before the entire Northern Territories. Rose's breath caught. You mean a mating ceremony? I mean a coronation, Gary corrected. Where you're formally recognized as my Luna and co-ruler, where every Alpha bends knee and acknowledges your authority as equal to mine. His amber eyes searched hers. I know it's fast. No, we've only known each other for a few weeks. But Rose, I don't need time to know you're the one I want beside me for the rest of my life. The mate bond already makes us permanent. This would just make it political as well as personal. Rose looked down at Luna, who was watching them with those two intelligent gold eyes. The baby who would grow up in a world shaped by the decisions Rose made today. What kind of world did Rose want for her? One where power came from domination and fear? Or one where strength was measured by how well you protected those weaker than yourself? When? Rose asked. Gary's face split into a grin. 2 weeks. Enough time to prepare, but not so long that our enemies can regroup and cause trouble. 2 weeks. Rose repeated. Then she smiled, a real smile that felt like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. Okay. Let's do it. Let's show the Northern Territories what real partnership looks like. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of preparation. Rose was fitted for ceremonial robes, not the traditional pure white of unmated Lunas, but silver fabric that shimmered in the light and honored her Silvermoon heritage. Seamstresses fussed over every detail while Rose stood still and tried not to fidget. Dawn coached her on pack history and politics, filling in the gaps in her education. Janice trained her in basic self-defense, insisting that a Luna needed to be able to protect herself even with Silvermoon gifts. And Gary spent every spare moment with Rose and Luna, building the family bond that would be the foundation of their rule. The coronation would take place in the Grand Hall of the King's Hall, with representatives from every Northern pack in attendance. Alphas who'd once sneered at the idea of an Omega Luna would bow before Rose and acknowledge her authority. The irony wasn't lost on Rose. Weeks ago, she'd been invisible. Now she would be impossible to ignore. 3 days before the coronation, Rose received an unexpected visitor. Alpha Philip Bright requested a private audience, and Rose agreed to meet him in one of the hall's smaller sitting rooms. Janice stood guard outside, but the Blood Moon Alpha came alone. Rose, Philip said, inclining his head respectfully. Thank you for seeing me. Of course, Rose said. She gestured to a chair. Please, sit. They settled across from each other, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Philip said, I owe you an apology. Rose blinked in surprise. For what? For not protecting you better when you were in my pack, Philip said bluntly. For allowing Lee to abuse her authority and make your life hell. For not noticing that one of my pack members was living in a shed without heat or adequate food. For failing in my duty as Alpha to ensure every wolf under my protection was treated with dignity. Rose didn't know what to say to that. Philip had always been distant but fair. She'd never expected him to apologize for the conditions of her life in Blood Moon. You didn't know, Rose said finally. I was just one Omega among dozens. Easy to overlook. That's not an excuse, Philip countered. A good Alpha knows every wolf in his pack, knows their struggles and needs. I failed you, Rose, and I'm sorry. Rose felt something loosen in her chest, resentment she hadn't realized she'd been carrying. Thank you, that means more than you know. Philip nodded, then reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. I also wanted to give you this. It's from your mother. Rose's hands shook as she took the envelope. Margaret? She wrote to me. After word spread about your Silvermoon heritage and your coronation, she reached out, Philip said. Asked me to deliver this personally. I don't know what it says, but... He stood. I'll give you privacy to read it." He left, and Rose sat alone with the envelope bearing her mother's handwriting. For a long moment, she just stared at it, the woman who'd abandoned her, who'd declared Rose a shame to the family when she presented as an Omega, who'd walked away and never looked back. What could she possibly have to say now? Rose's hands trembled as she opened the envelope and pulled out the letter. "Dear Rose, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know the truth I've kept buried for 19 years. You are not Thomas Forbes's daughter. Your father was a wolf named Jonathan Silvermoon, the last known heir of the royal bloodline. He was kind and gentle, and everything good in this world, and I loved him with every fiber of my being. But our love was forbidden. I was a beta. He was royalty in hiding, trying to escape the wolves who hunted his family. When I became pregnant with you, Jonathan begged me to run away with him, to leave everything behind and start fresh where no one knew our names. I refused. I was a coward. Afraid of losing my position, my security, my comfortable life. So Jonathan left alone, promising to return for us once he'd secured safe passage. He never came back. I learned later that he'd been killed by Brotherhood hunters who'd been tracking him for years. They wanted the Silvermoon bloodline extinct. When you were born, I saw Jonathan in your eyes, saw the power lurking beneath your innocent surface, and I was terrified. Terrified that the Brotherhood would find you, would kill you like they'd killed your father. So I married Thomas and claimed you were his daughter, hid your true heritage, and when you presented as an Omega, when your Silvermoon blood manifested in its hidden form, I convinced myself it was for the best, that you'd be safer overlooked and invisible than acknowledged and targeted. I told myself I was protecting you by abandoning you, by pushing you away, by making sure no one would connect you to the Silvermoon line. But I was really just protecting myself. From guilt, from responsibility, from the constant reminder of the man I'd loved and lost and the daughter I was too afraid to defend. I'm sorry, Rose. I'm so sorry. You deserved a mother who fought for you, who stood beside you, who helped you understand your heritage instead of burying it. I don't expect you to respond to this letter. Don't expect forgiveness or reconciliation. I just needed you to know that you were loved. Your father loved you even though he never got to meet you. And despite everything, despite my cowardice and failures, I love you too. I'm proud of the woman you've become, proud of your strength and courage and compassion. Your father would be proud too. Be well, Rose. Be happy. Be everything I was too afraid to let you be. Margaret. Rose read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her father had been a Silvermoon, had loved her mother, had died trying to protect his bloodline from the very Brotherhood that had just tried to kill Rose and Luna. And her mother had abandoned her, out of fear, not hatred, but a misguided attempt at protection. It didn't excuse what Margaret had done, didn't erase the years of loneliness and pain, but it explained it, gave Rose context for the rejection she'd never understood. The door opened quietly, and Gary entered. He took one look at Rose's tear-stained face, and immediately crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "What happened?" he asked gently. Rose handed him the letter without words. Gary read it quickly, his expression darkening with anger on her behalf. "Your mother made a terrible choice," Rose finished, "but she was scared, and she did what she thought would keep me safe, even if it hurt me." She looked up at Gary. "I'm not saying I forgive her, not yet, maybe not ever. But I understand now. Understand that fear can make you do terrible things to the people you love." Gary pulled her closer. "You're stronger than she ever was. Braver. You didn't run from danger. You walked straight into it to save others. You're everything your father hoped you'd be. Everything the Silvermoon bloodline should be proud to claim." Rose let herself cry against his chest for the father she'd never known, for the mother who'd chosen fear over love, for the childhood she'd lost, but also for the future she was building, the family she'd found, the life that stretched ahead, full of possibility instead of limitation. "I want to name Luna's middle name after my father," Rose said when the tears finally subsided. "Luna Jonathan Fletcher. So he's remembered. So she knows where part of her power comes from." Gary kissed the top of her head. "I think that's perfect." The day of the coronation dawned clear and bright. Rose stood in front of a mirror, barely recognizing herself. The silver robes flowed around her like liquid moonlight. Her dark hair had been styled in an intricate braid woven with silver thread, and on her wrist, the mate mark gleamed black against her pale skin, permanent proof of her bond with Gary. Janice entered, carrying Luna. The baby had been dressed in a tiny silver gown that matched Rose's robes, and she looked like a perfect little princess. "Ready?" Janice asked. Rose took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They made their way to the grand hall, where hundreds of wolves waited, every alpha from the Northern Territories, representatives from dozens of packs, witnesses who would carry word of this coronation back to their homes. The hall fell silent as Rose entered. She walked down the center aisle, Luna in her arms, Janice at her side. At the far end, Gary waited on a raised platform. He wore ceremonial robes as well, deep blue embroidered with gold that marked him as the Alpha King. Beside him stood Dawn, who would officiate the ceremony, and Commander Carey, representing the military power that protected the throne. Rose climbed the steps to the platform, her heart hammering. This was it. The moment that would define the rest of her life. Gary took Luna from Rose's arms and passed the baby to Dawn. Then he took both of Rose's hands in his. "Rose Forbes," Gary said, his voice carrying through the vast hall. "You came to me as an Omega. Unknown. Overlooked. Dismissed by wolves who couldn't see your true worth. But the moon goddess knew. Fate knew. And I know." He lifted one of her hands, displaying the mate mark to the assembled wolves. "You are my fated mate. Chosen by powers greater than any of us. You saved my daughter's life. You defeated the Brotherhood through courage and compassion. You manifested gifts that haven't been seen in 200 years. And you've shown every wolf here that strength comes not from domination, but from the willingness to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Gary released her hands and turned to Dawn, who held a silver circlet, delicate but unmistakably powerful. "A crown. By the authority vested in me as Alpha King of the Northern Territories," Gary said formally, "I name you Rose Forbes Silvermoon, Luna Queen of the North, co-ruler and equal partner, voice for the voiceless, shield for the vulnerable, light in the darkness." He took the circlet from Dawn and placed it gently on Rose's head. The moment the silver touched her hair, Rose felt it, a surge of power and recognition from every wolf in the hall, the mate bond flaring golden. Her Silvermoon heritage responding to the acknowledgement of her authority. "Bow before your Luna," Gary commanded. And they did. Every alpha in the hall went to one knee. Every beta and gamma and omega followed suit. Hundreds of wolves acknowledging Rose's authority, accepting her as their queen. Rose looked out over the sea of bowed heads and felt tears slip down her cheeks. Not from sadness. From overwhelming joy and gratitude and the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Gary turned her to face him. "Do you accept this responsibility? This burden and privilege? Do you swear to rule with wisdom and compassion? To protect the weak and guide the strong? To stand beside me as my equal until our dying day?" "I do," Rose said clearly. "I swear it." Gary smiled, that beautiful, genuine smile that transformed his stern face. "Then by the power of the mate bond, and the authority of the Alpha King, I claim you as mine, my Luna, my queen, my partner in all things." He kissed her, claiming and tender, and witnessed by every wolf in the Northern Territories. The hall erupted in cheers and howls of celebration. And Rose Forbes Silvermoon, who'd spent years being invisible, finally understood what it meant to be seen. That night, after the ceremonies and feasting and political meetings finally ended, Rose and Gary retreated to their private quarters. Luna had been put to bed hours ago, sleeping peacefully under Dawn's watchful eye. Now it was just Rose and Gary, mates and equals and partners, preparing to build a future together. "How are you feeling?" Gary asked as they sat together on a balcony overlooking the valley. Stars glittered overhead, and the moon shone full and bright. "Overwhelmed," Rose admitted, "terrified, hopeful, grateful, all of it at once." Gary pulled her close, and Rose leaned into his warmth. "You did beautifully today. Every alpha left here understanding that you're not someone to be dismissed or underestimated. You're a force unto yourself. Because of you," Rose said. "Because you gave me the chance to be more than what I was told I could be." "No," Gary corrected gently. "Because you chose to be more. I just held the door open. You're the one who walked through it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. Then Rose said, "What happens now?" With the Brotherhood scattered, and Doris awaiting trial, what comes next? We rebuild, Gary said simply. We implement the reforms I've been planning, better conditions for lower-ranked wolves, education for all pack members, laws protecting the vulnerable. And we raise Luna to be the bridge between old and new. The wolf who can unite the territories in ways neither of us could alone. That's a lot of pressure for one child, Rose said. She won't be alone, Gary countered. She'll have us. Have the best teachers and protectors in the Northern Territories. Have a mother who understands what it means to grow up feeling powerless, and a father who'll move mountains to keep her safe. He pressed a kiss to Rose's temple. We'll figure it out together. One day at a time. Rose turned in his arms and kissed him properly, deep and claiming and full of promise. The mate bond flared between them, golden warmth and silver light intertwining. When they finally pulled apart, Rose said, "I love you. I know it's fast. No, we're still learning each other. But I love you, Gary Fletcher. Love the father you are, the king you're trying to be, the mate who makes me feel worthy and seen and valued." Gary's eyes shone with emotion. "I love you too. More than I thought possible. You're my second chance at happiness. My proof that the moon goddess doesn't give up on broken wolves." He cupped her face in both hands. "Thank you for saving Luna. For saving me. For choosing to stay when you could have run. Where else would I go?" Rose smiled. "This is home now. You and Luna, and this crazy, complicated life we're building. This is where I belong. Forever," Gary agreed. "For however long forever lasts, you belong here, with me." They kissed again under the stars, two wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds. An alpha king who'd lost everything and learned to hope again. And an omega who'd discovered she was never weak, just waiting for the right moment to shine. Together, they would build something better than what came before. Together, they would show the Northern Territories what true strength looked like. Together, they were unstoppable. And in her crib, Luna Jonathan Fletcher, daughter of an alpha king and a silver moon, Luna slept peacefully, dreaming of the future she would inherit and the pack she would one day protect. The broken had become whole, the forgotten had been remembered, and the omega who scrubbed floors had become a queen. This was their happily ever after. And it was only the beginning. Epilogue. 3 years later, Rose stood at the window of the king's hall, watching Luna play in the gardens below. The child was 3 now, precocious and brilliant, and already manifesting abilities that made Dawn frantically reference ancient texts. Yesterday, Luna had made flowers bloom out of season just by touching them. Last week, she'd calmed a frightened wolf pup with nothing but her will. The combination of Alpha King blood and Silver Moon heritage was creating something unprecedented. Something powerful and beautiful and occasionally terrifying. But Luna had good teachers. Rose worked with her daily on control and compassion. Gary taught her strength and responsibility, and an entire pack of wolves who'd once dismissed omegas now treated the child of a former omega with reverence and love. "She's getting stronger," Gary said, coming to stand beside Rose. His arm slipped around her waist, familiar and comfortable after 3 years of partnership. "I know," Rose said. "Sometimes I wonder what we've unleashed on the world. What she'll become when she's fully grown. She'll become exactly what she's meant to be," Gary said confidently. "Because she has you to guide her. To show her that power without compassion is tyranny. That strength means protecting the vulnerable, not crushing them." Rose leaned into him, watching as Luna laughed and ran through the grass. Janice was with her, the warrior who'd become like an aunt to the child, and in the distance, Rose could see other children joining the play. Pack pups from every rank, playing together without the rigid hierarchies that had defined previous generations. Things were changing, slowly, but changing. "I got a letter from Margaret today," Rose said quietly. Gary tensed slightly. "And?" She asked if she could visit, meet Luna, try to, I don't know, build something from the ruins. Rose was quiet for a moment. "I told her yes." Gary looked at her in surprise. "You're sure?" "No," Rose admitted. "But Luna should know her grandmother, should understand where she came from, the good and the bad, and maybe." She trailed off, emotions complicated. "Maybe everyone deserves a second chance. Margaret made terrible choices. But she's trying to make amends. Trying to be better. That's very gracious of you, Gary said. That's what Silvermoons do, apparently, Rose said with a small smile. We extend mercy even when it's not deserved. We believe in redemption and second chances. She looked up at Gary. You gave me a second chance at life, at happiness. Maybe I can give Margaret one too. Gary kissed her forehead. This is why you're an incredible Luna. Why the packs are thriving under your influence. You lead with your heart without losing your strength. Below, Luna spotted her parents watching and waved enthusiastically, her gold eyes shining with joy. Rose waved back, her heart full to bursting. This was her life now. Her family, her purpose. She was Rose Forbes Silvermoon, Luna Queen of the North, mate to the Alpha King, mother to a child who would change the world. And she had earned every bit of it, not through birth or rank or predetermined destiny, but through courage, compassion, and the refusal to let others define her worth. The broken Omega had become a queen, and she would make sure no wolf ever felt as worthless as she once had. That was her promise, her purpose, her legacy. And it started with a single child playing in the gardens, loved and protected, and taught that power meant responsibility, not domination. The future was bright, and Rose would make sure it stayed that way.